Okay, took ourselves a little week off there. Had a little relaxation. Looks like we got some rain, just kind of along the lines of what I wanted. And we've had some settling here. If you remember, I think I was up onto the waterproof membrane. So this is just with, again, just some typical rain, the amount of compaction that needed to occur here. And so now I'll start by putting a bit more material out on top and then going to work on the floor in there. But that's rather than heaping it up real high and hoping to get there when you know, with the settling, I just wanted to let it run its course, basically. So that's going to need to happen everywhere else around here. That's the kind of problem that you're going to have trying to put a deck back out here right away. We had to have this excavation for the lifting arrangement for the chimney itself, and of course in the back corner we need to get that hole filled, you know, as well, plus all of this. And so this all must have gone right down together as one, which is nice, and more of a uniform blob right here, which is good. So we'll see how much Ed got up to. Looks like, ooh, yeah, there's been some stone fill that went in here. Got some rainwater into my wheel barrel. I was also looking to have him, that's just an acorn top. Looking to have him wheel some down to the far end. That was looking a little low. Looks like it's maybe topped up a bit. And we still got our hole here for a larger pier that I want to get to doing as soon as I can. But there's some clay content in this backfilling dirt here. You know, that's maybe silt. But in some of these low-lying areas, the puddle's still holding water pretty well on top. And again, a combination of carrying all the little silty particles that come together to form the clay, essentially, with the water. It may have lined its own depression, but it also may have just reconstituted the clay particulate that's homogeneous within it and just brought it to life here where there's water enough to show it. But then the situation is the same. It holds the water. Mr. Raccoon has been up to it. Anyway, so that gives me pause on just throwing it all back in and around the house. We might more ideally put bank run, which is just a scoop of the gravel pit. I have to throw some stone onto that in this area instead, which will mean that it's all gravel. It's from sand down up to, well, if it's not filtered, I might get 2-inch filtered, but still from sand up to 2-inch or right on up to whatever. Try your luck. Hope you don't find a big boulder, but that would be better. And that is what we'll use in the garage itself. I just ordered that 2-inch filtered bank run for filling up in here. And that'll plate compact, and we will run water on it because the water carries, with gravity's help, carries the small pieces down in and cinches up larger gaps, which is what the action was here more than anything else that helped that. It's not the weight of the water, it's the flowing down through and pulling, jostling, washing things out from below, and then things above can sit down of their own accord, or the suction of the water mass itself being dragged by gravity. So it's all kind of interesting kind of syndromes and mechanisms, but we don't get that in here because we're under a roof, and so I'll just soak the hell out of this, trying not to get the wood wet. But we'll put a bunch of bank run in here. We'll overfill it. I'll run a bunch of water on it for a while, just basically let the hose run in a variety of places, and then drive around on it, plate compact it, and then move the workshop stuff up here, and we can start in the basement to lay out the styrofoam board and get the posts in their exact right spot, and we'll get into all of that eventually. But for now, we're going to add a little bit more material here and see if we can't surgically remove all of what we need to get out of the way, starting with the storm door and the baseboard and all that in here, and open this thing on up. Let's check it out. Alright, so I end up just putting stone. I don't like how much clay there is in the soil. However, of all the places to put it, right where you walk up and come and go here, for this to be all puddles all the time, even though below all that clay it would drain if it could get to it. This way, the last couple of feet, it's very permeable, regardless of what we do with grading and stuff on top of it. That'll probably be bank run as well. And then some topsoil and then some grass. But that ends up being like a husk or a shell, and then it can fall right down into this stone. If it gets stuck on the clay that went in there first or something, it can bleed out to both sides. Anyway, it's going to be nicer to walk on and work. And of all the places around the house not to drain apparently from the surface, the entryway isn't one of the ones that I want it to be. So that's my thinking there. I'll probably go so far as to put as much as I can of that pile into this hole and the one from the cribbing out on the other corner. Consume as much of that as I can. And then Ed wanted this low area fill, to put some of it over there and get down to like practically nothing, and then order in a couple of loads of bank run to finish up and do, I think, around the foundation. I think is worth it. It's one of those things where it's like dirt, you know, who cares? You've got dirt that came out of the site, put the dirt back in. Well, it's kind of some of the most important anatomy to the whole project, how we leave it. And so we've got the stone in there and some other components, but it's a system. And if the system's got a weak link, or you skip a step, or you do something differently than what's ideal, then you can kind of hamper all the investment that you made. So blah, blah, blah. I'm not really sure, even though I've always got to say what I'm trying to do. So I had started by thinking I'd use the soil here. I think I'll probably order it in, since 20 or 22 tons is like $250 delivered. I don't know what that is. A piece of the old, anyway. So for less than $1,000 easily, we could have just all nice bank run gravel show up, and that would be, I think that's the best case scenario. All right, I got to keep the phone out of the sun so it doesn't overheat, but let's see how quickly I can get the storm door and stuff down from this little thing here. Got to go get my tools first. All right, well, Ed said he'd had problems with the bees before, and I've just noticed that off the end of the clapboard and under the J channel going into the soffit area, it's got some small non-yellow jacket looking fellas, we'll call them. Anyway, I am going to go to the hardware store and come back. I need it anyway for the yellow jackets at home, so I'm going to come back and put a big fat foamy bead along the crack there before I try to go back to work on this. And if I can't kill them all today, I'll load it up again before I go and try to find something else to do. But anyway, overnight's the time to fight with bees because everybody's home and they're cold and slow. Middle of the day isn't really ideal, but I hadn't seen any apparent activity or a hive. The robin, I think, is long gone. So, anyway. Alright, well, I got some Spectracide, Carpenter Bee, and Yellow Jacket. Kills on contact foam. And I think I got a Raid can of something also, just to get, sometimes it's nice to just experiment. So that you know, at least for me, the stuff that I always reach for, it's normally that stuff, but I wanted to try something else while I had an opportunity. I just lubed up the whole area and right in the top crevasse in case they started to avoid coming out. The thing is, they really weren't doing much until I was up there monkeying around, and if I can just get the top of this to let go, I can kind of abandon. I don't have to be up there. I can no pun intended, I can work down here. So, see if I can't get that far. Watch me jump off the ladder and break my ankle while I'm getting stung by bees. So I really wonder sometimes how much easier things are. They must be easier to make what looks like the face of a brick mold from far away, but to just hem and do a couple bends on the brake with some textured aluminum. So what someone has done here is they have left the trim on the face of the jamb as that goes around a corner, I believe, and drops back down. I'll have to see, it's hard to see in there, but they flashed over the face of the trim and then applied what looked like brick mold and J-channel up onto it. So yeah, like the clapboard goes from on the previous siding and ramps up onto the old trim, all for the sake of, like, I don't know what. I really don't know what. I mean, somebody might have just, what you should have done is take the trim, the farmhouse trim off, which is wider, apply a true piece of brick molding trim to it, put a J-channel on the edge of that, and then fill in between with slightly longer pieces of clapboard. So I don't know what somebody was trying to pull here, but this whole, the siding job here was just ultra cheap. Ultra cheap and shitty. Like that. Water is supposed to run out the end of the J channel, but obviously the bees are living in there too or something. I just saw something come out of there, I think. Anyway, that's all just an opening to behind the plastic siding all the way down. I don't really know. This is one of those things where when someone does this type of work, quote unquote, does a job like that, it's hard to know how much to fix. You kind of need to fix some so that you can continue to do your job. So like I have to take this entire door out of here, put a floor in here, frame a door opening on that floor, and then do something to finish out and around it. And so like I'm going to uncover all of the bullshit now over the course of getting that done. So I guess I gotta take this. I don't know, this is like plastic. Yeah, this is like plastic flashing, like 20 thou or 30 thou vinyl. Gotta take that off, and then try to get the molding out from behind there and leave the J channel. I don't even know what that's nailed into. It's probably nailed into that. We'll see here. We may end up with the clapboard off the front of this all the way around, which is definitely going to get us involved with the bees further. I really am just working down here. So the thing is, like, it'd have been nice to keep the wooden jamb trim from the inside and the out. But in the end, what we're going to put in here is a pre-hung fiberglass exterior door, because that's not an exterior door. And now this space is part of the envelope inside, because you've got warm air underneath this in the full basement. And so this is now, as it should be, part of the residence and part of the insulated envelope of the home. And the floor in here is going to fly right in level with that floor. And somewhere there I'm going to have to do something with the threshold. But anyway, because of that, I guess I could just trash this wooden jamb. I was just looking to, like, I installed the shore to hold this thing up to get the braces out, which I guess we're doing something, because when I took the one away, the other one was quite tight, so I don't know what that was all about. So I've lifted some, and now I'm lifted on the top section of the jamb, and normally the jamb is put together at the top two corners. It's like three-sided. Nice to bring it out all in one, but I think I'm going to have to take the sides out and leave the top, or do something else here. I have to back the tension off the shore and see how much it's actually. I could throw a block underneath it somewhere if I thought. The problem with blocking underneath it is that it's obviously completely rotted away because of the way that it was constructed before. I mean, it's completely rotten. So I guess backing on the sides, back there's something I could throw a block to support it, which will be in my way of constructing what I'm trying to construct here. And then I could take the shore back down, and then I could dig the rest of the jamb all the way out of this opening, and then I could put the shore back and take the pressure off the block again. And I'm going to frame through here, but I can go across in front of the shore so I can stay in while I'm building. So that's my plan now. Block up, shore out, remove jamb, shore back in, block out, then we'll see what happens. All right, I got a couple samples that I'll end up using, probably because they're long enough, of original 1 3/4 inch thick finished lumber from the era of this house. And that's going to be representational of the plate that's underneath the sill plate that used to be on the old foundation. See, we're at 1 3/4 inch, or at least 1 5/8 inch. So 13/16 or so. Anyway, it's thicker than just using an ordinary, 1.5 inch stick or whatever. And we got it. It was right over there. So, knock that on the ground. That's good for it. So, I'll put him in first as a first layer. And that's onto the new sill plate that was attached to the foundation. So, I'm basically copying the anatomy in this area as we've got everywhere else. And I'll end up opening up the wall and cutting in there as well. However, I encountered these sort of column pieces of millwork that have you know, original crown tops and stuff. It looks to me like this was the outside of the house, and then somebody built it, or maybe it had just the roof section. Anyway, over time, someone left the original millwork and continued to add here and cope it to fit and stuff, whatever. And so I started trying to pull what looked like a separate block here off of here and opening up a gap, but it's dragging a gap up into there. And so I initially thought, well, I'll just cut it off and make two pieces out of it. However, more importantly, we're going to have joists in here made of 2x8 coming through like this from one side to the other, and then we're going to have 3/4 inch subfloor on top. So I just put that on here as a mock-up, and for some reason it's not in the same location, but that's close enough for finished flooring to be added and some shoe molding or something. Anyway, I wanted to leave enough of that to where it worked out just above my subfloor that I'm going to add here. And it looks to me like it's just going to mean I need to cut a little bit higher on the edge of that threshold for the subfloor to come in, and the finished flooring will come in just a touch below then the threshold itself, which is kind of how you want everything to be, which is nice. So I guess I'll use a square on the face of this to square that line over. It's hard to say how exactly to do that. Again, it's not going to be totally seen in the end, so that's probably how I'll do it real quick. Then I'll cut that and remove that piece and set him aside with the rest of this that I've essentially set aside. I got the top of the threshold to twist out. Is that a bee or a piece of shit? Of there. The trim is still on the face here, and you can see it was sheathed with tongue and groove. I want to call that 3/4 of an inch. It may only be 5/8, but it's pretty hardy. Yeah. 3/4 of an inch. Tongue and groove sheathing on at least this entryway. Now, if it's so, that would mean that it's similar in age to the rest of the house, if not being original to the house. So, moving on. I'll cut those up. I see that that's not really square to other stuff there, so I don't know. I don't want to get too bogged down in details here. I'll probably use a square to throw the line out. I'll cut the lower blocks off of there. I'll get the drywall cut up and out of my way. I can see there's a surface. Oh, and by the way, I didn't need to. I put the blocks in and took the tension off, but then I see the blocks were loose, so I just slid them back out again. So we probably never needed any kind of braces in here. These things were not necessary, but it was certainly a good insurance policy. And so there's the gap. And anyway, I pulled this back out of here. I remember having seen the sole plate that doesn't exist here anymore because this is all rotten from the water that just pours probably into the siding somehow, somewhere, and down behind the siding and wherever it goes here, but it's just rotten that right down. That will need to be reconstructed as part of the new doorway, and everything's going to be cut up here, so everything will be cut to the height of that line. That's something else I can use. I may use the laser in here. I got to make sure. Yeah, I'll just use the laser because the gap is pretty uniform. This whole thing is like out of square. I hate to sound so like confused, but this was made by plumbing down the exact structural points of this entryway, just as we did with the rest of the house. The rest of the house is pretty darn good, but this thing is like, that's an acute angle. It's like 88 or 89 degrees rather than 90. And then this is whatever it is. And then this is, this is like 91 or 92 degrees. So the whole thing is like skewed over structurally. And like, if I had more time and there was more money here, I would have done a really exhaustive measure of this thing and tried to form and pour something perfectly square and then like wrestle this thing, like if it's been pushed over then pull it back. I just didn't end up doing any of that. So that's what the confusion is about, is like how to work off of something, because it's kind of a fun house, and so you can't just go squaring off of some stuff and measuring off of other stuff, and all of a sudden you've got yourself an incomprehensible situation that you can't handle. So there's a bit of head scratching to do while I'm here. However, I'm feeling okay. We're going to cut everything up. It's like I said, like I was saying, should I use the laser level, or should I just pull up and measure the same measurement from the bottom edge of the drywall? That's probably smarter right now. which would mean that we're taking the same amount up and off of walls that are theoretically built all exactly the same height, because the studs that make them up were all cut together the same length on the bench around the horses before they were used to construct these walls, rather than using the laser level, which is level to the earth, and almost nothing here may necessarily be relatively level. So we'll figure that much out. We'll get this thing opened up. That's how we use that to sort of figure out where to start cutting, and it should leave us enough room to build what we need in here. And I'm going to try and leave the outside undisturbed and just get everything cut out and away from inside, construct everything we need inside, and then it can be used while we scratch our heads and debate whether or not we're going to continue to do much of anything. If I go ahead and do everything that's necessary by taking the whole outside off and getting all involved here to do a nice job in finishing it all up to the end, it's not necessary to go that far right now. There's other parts of the project that need to come before then. And sometimes it's unclear to folks why exactly things needed to take so long or were so involved or costly or whatever. So I'm just going to do the bare minimum of what needs to happen here, which is to put a floor in it. And then we can look at, well, this is what's left. You know, this is the undisturbed amount of stuff that's left. And to finish up here the way that it needs to be finished is quite obviously, you know, still ahead of us. That's probably more professional way of going about it. Here's something I want to mention. I can smell this burning from the heat of my saw blade. And if you look, see the smoke? There's a cavity underneath this. It's open air behind that trim. And there's some small amount of debris and tar paper up there, which is super dry. And I still don't like that there's smoke coming out of there. And this isn't something that I'm just gonna leave until later. You get a hot tool or a hot blade, tar and stuff like that smells and stuff when renovating, and it's normal. But if you do something like this at the end of the day and you walk away and you leave it to smolder, and then it catches a breeze, and then it goes up in there and gets started burning away in the wall, we could lose the whole place to a structure fire. And so I'm going to stop right now, and I'm going to make sure that that's quit by using some water or something, or some Windex, something that I can find around the house. Alright, there was just some all-purpose cleaner under the sink. I soaked it down, and I guess the camera had to fall away before, but if you look right up, there's actually air gap behind this piece of trim. Like, I'm gonna fall, but I can put my finger, if I hold the camera, I can put my fingers right in there. And that's the most concerning thing. When everything is flat packed tightly and there's a little bit of surface smoke or something, that's one thing. But knowing that that's a big column of open area, incredibly dry and crispy, coupled with a little bit of smoke that I smelled and continued to see a minute or two after cutting, just took the opportunity there to let you know, to be aware of that. Now, as I suspected as well, this is what would be called an appearance board. It ends there and it goes to there, right there. That's actually the rim joist back there. This is the rim joist. If you go downstairs, we can look and see. This is just a piece that's painted gray and meant to be, you know, kicked or whatever on your way up into the house. We're not going to need that, and I could, like a hack, apply my first ledger there, my first floor joist for this area could be applied to that. But it would bridge across and go beyond the end of this and go over into here, and then you leave this cavity behind it, back here after you go across the face of it, where fire can travel, and again up into there. And now that we have activities happening here, if you should have anything down here, that's just a quick way to engulf the front door in a flame situation in the future. Things that you don't ever want to have happen to begin with, but it's part and parcel of why I'm going to pull that off of there now, as well as clearing those other blocks off, which I don't really know. Those must be like, that's the first stud, I guess, to the wall, So that has to be cut up here too. And so I'm going to plot that line that I cut all the way along. It's essentially where the paper and paint meet. That's a pretty good way of getting started here. So I'll cut the exposed paper parts off, open the wall up, take a look, pull the appearance board off, yada yada. All right. I had figured it would be the rim joist behind that board. However, it is sheathing, which suggests that the entryway actually came later than the original construction house. I want to say. That's what I want to say to you. There's also this piece of 5/4 actually gets you out flush with the original trim to the door jamb, which is what this is. And then this is an appearance like column thing across the face. So I guess it probably, yeah. So that just supports the other side of this piece to come all the way down in front of this. So, and it looks like, I don't know what this is the question that I have, but this little piece of thickness is, and then somebody slapped a 2x4 on and took off and went. So I've got to cut, now we need another 1.5 inches here, because this is where the surface of the subfloor needs to be, but the 1.5 inches here, I got to cut the studs up 1.5 inches higher and replace the, I'm actually, if I could get that off there, maybe I could, nah, it's all rotten down there, I'll rebuild it. So it needs a new sole plate to the wall, so the studs have to be cut up 1.5 inches from there, and we're going to use baseboard in here anyway. So really the drywall could be cut up a good 2 inches higher, and that's no problem because I can do all the framing, the changes that I want to do, and then the baseboard that we put in here will cover it. The question is, like, I'm going to suck that loose insulation out with the vacuum right now from down in here. And I'd like to think that it won't just keep falling down, falling down, falling down. I'm going to try and keep that from happening. So I'm going to vacuum that all out, what you can see, and vacuum up a little bit further, and then go out and cut up a little bit higher, and then cut the structural, the studs and the plate off of the sheathing boards. And that becomes actually a problem because I'm used to working from inside, leaving the outside alone when you have plywood sheathing. But when it's boards and they're horizontal, like every 6 inches, 5 or 6 inches, it's another board. And so that first board is going to want to come with the bottom of all this stuff, and actually cutting high enough I may get the second board to want to fall down because there's nothing holding it up anymore. It's not part of the rest of the boards the way the plywood is all the same piece. So then you're looking at, and we've also got to see what kind of siding nails are being used. I may end up just uncovering the outside to make this easier on myself, take a course or two of vinyl off on the outside. I don't know. We'll see. Pressing on. All right, I'd got the stone in there and some other areas, but he isn't quite done sanding it all down through the tubage in the back window. So when I had to drive out back, part of the reason why I chose not to continue going out to get the clay soil, depending, including the fact that for all the reasons I've already mentioned, I had to drive over what was left of the stone pile that was there for him to shovel down, which is just packing it into the ground, making it more difficult to spoon up with a shovel. the tube remains in the window hole because it takes a minute to install. And so we're scrambling up and over in the other corner to get in and out. But I needed that ladder in over here, so I had to bring the ladder over with me, and then I had to bring it back to get back out. And so kind of inefficient since he didn't quite finish with the stone over the past week that I haven't been here. Just taking a moment to remind folks that if we're doing stuff to be efficient here, we got to stay up to snuff on all the things that are supposed to be getting done in a timely fashion. So no problem, I'll work through that. This is on the back of the board that was under the threshold. I think that says, I don't know, and ROP PML something to 1929. That looks like a number, otherwise I'd say 1929 is an ostensible build date. This piece goes under door sill. PEACE. This piece. Kind of cool. So we'll hang on to that. I don't even know what that insulation was. I thought for a second it was rat's nest when I was in it over here where it was rotten, or a mouse, I mean, I should say. But I don't know if it's cellulose. It doesn't feel... Yeah, maybe wool. Let's see if it would burn. Unsure. Not trying to breathe it. So we got it vacuumed out of there. I'm going to cut that up. And then, like I say, this first board, see, he's only attached into the stud and maybe into the sill. And so when you start cutting that stud off and this one up here and that, then the whole thing wants to fall away. That board wants to fall away. But that's what we're relying on to carry this beautiful first course of vinyl. And that's behind the corner, which has gotten monkeyed. So we're going to kind of be in for like a blown open, discombobulated lower area of the exterior of this thing, at the very least, if not a full-blown tear off. I really don't want to get into that. I know it looks small, but there's a lot of work here in residing this or whatever. It basically starts by ripping everything off 100%, installing, having a floor, installing the new exterior door, trimming it on the outside at least, and then residing everything. And the way in which that it's monkeyed up underneath the edges of the soffit turns it into... It'd be really nice to avoid doing anything. Anyway, I'm going to continue to plan on not having to do any of that. Let's see what we can get done here. All right, well, still don't know what that insulation is. And I leaned on the oscillating tool more than the Sawzall because believe it or not, the Sawzall is just more violent, and the more of that would have shaken down, although a lot of it has already shaken down. I'll do something with that eventually. We'll have to, I don't know if we're going to take the drywall off the inside here, and when we're framing the new doorway and stuff, we can look at that, because insulation is a question of what's in the wall, and down here we're working with the floor system, which can be insulated from below. So this is our original, or our new sill. We'll add another layer to be like the original sill. I had considered taking away the sheathing boards from the rim joist. Now this is the sill plate original. Let me find somewhere to lean here. It's the original sill plate, and there's a rim joist sitting on top of it here on the first, the first 1 3/4 in from it. But then the sheathing goes over everybody, and it keeps going right on out behind siding, which is the original siding that was in behind this also. So it makes me think that this entryway was added shortly after the house was constructed, or the enclosure was created shortly after the house was constructed, or it was the whole house was sided first, and then for some strange reason they put the entryway on like immediately. Anyway, I've decided not to cut this out just for the first joist that holds the edge of the plywood, which will go in here, and I could barely even fasten down into it as if it's here. If I go any deeper to the left, I'm even having a harder time screwing down through it at an angle trying to hit the ledger, and then I'm just building another layer on the ledger just for the sake of screwing it. So anyway, this is all to that end. This is all helpful to us, this thickness being on here, so we'll leave it. I did cut back to the back of the sheathing boards, which did manage to stay on here, flush with the siding here, and this surface should be flush with the outside surface of the new green plate, because that was sent flush to the concrete, and the concrete form was set to this exact location of the outside surface of the framing, or the inside surface of this sheathing is all one and the same, and so we should be very close to that. And I meant to grab the 2x8 from outside before I started this spiel. Sorry, it's awfully difficult for me to be creative and efficient and record and eloquent in my explanation and physically in the right place at the right time with the right stuff when you're talking about, ouch, that was my knee, a ladder, and slippery insulation that we shouldn't breathe, and gloves. It's not good. I'm doing a lot of... Okay, so our rim, we'll have a second sill in here. I don't know why this camera lens is so close. Anyway, we'll have our second sill in here. But then we'll have a rim joist out here going all the way around, and then against the face of it, we'll have our first ledger that carries the plywood. And again, it'll be hard. We'll be up here. And it just should be we'll have just enough room for the plywood. So I'm going to either have to cut this up or notch the plywood out and around it. And I really think I'd rather cut it up. So I'll snap a line on it, drop the circular saw in as soon as I can, cut as much as I can before I run out of ability to do so, and then finish up with the oscillating tool. And so I just have to copy my work over to that side, and then I can cut the old sill layers and make some... This is going to go turn here and go right on by the door opening right over to there, solid for right now. It'd be cool if I could get this far over there, and then a rim joist all the way, the old sill and a rim joist all the way on by the end of the day. Let's see what happens. Alright, well, I was about to say that, you know, this is another point where I could just build this as described, put the plates down, get the rim joists in, set a couple of joists in here even before the end of my day today, looking good. However, there are some issues. Issue number one. They only gave me these two bolts in the foundation, and so one way or the other I chose to butt and pass this corner this way, which left this loose. If I had passed with this piece and caught that bolt, then this butt would have, I guess maybe not, pivoted because of this. So that would have been the way to do it, which I did not do. And so now my instinct was to make one whole piece to go from back there to up here to cover that seam, because you really don't want to double down on the seam if you can help it. Another thing that I can do is I can anchor to this, sorry, stupid tripod leg of the camera. I can anchor to this, and when I screw the second plate down into that, it'll pull that down, because right now that's loose. Or I could just stop what I'm doing, set up, drill into the concrete, install an anchor, countersink the hole, get all those drill guns out and drill stuff like that, all just to get that guy bolted down, which I will likely do. Then, this is the hole through which we had to shove the beam, as called out by Sean and constructed by the concrete contractor that he always uses. The one that ended up, despite the size of the I-beam being called out, the one that ended up over 3 inches too tall, too deep, and wildly too wide. I mean, it could have just been this big, and we would have been just fine. But this needs to be blocked in, and so I expect this will have to be cleaned and mortar and cut some blocks to fit, and everything's going to be sent down from above to squish in. If I go, at the very least, putting this second plate in here, it makes it difficult, I think, to fill with mortar, and I'd really kind of like to see this go back across. I probably had left it, and Sean said to cut that out of the way and stuff too, but it's like, so at this point I could remake these two. I could take these pieces off and remake that solid to here, and then I could take this piece off and remake it so it comes over to there and stops and goes all the way across and bolts up there and there, and then I'm back to kind of a nice setup. Or I could just drill and bolt this one down and then take this guy away and remake him all one piece. That might be, because I'm going to drill and countersink the new pieces anyway, so I may as well just drill and countersink a piece that's the right length and bolted up down there already and put him down permanent on his gasket. So that's probably what to do. So it takes the same tool setup, just to bolt the other end of him down, unbolt this, remake a piece, stick it down. But wait, there's more. That's not even the worst of it. Over here, I made this at 43 3/4 of an inch. And if I go out tight to there, which is at the back of this, and I go out flush to that piece there and get everybody kind of happy, so that they're all flush, I've got like a major discrepancy, a distance that goes to nothing on its way back there, and so this being an obtuse angle, or greater than 90 degrees, was a problem in plumbing down from this location, and ended up off by more than 2 inches, or at least 2 inches. Now over here, it's exactly where it should be, which my first thought was, oh geez, the whole thing is racked over some and it'll probably just move right back. Nope, it's rigid, it's not trying to move anywhere, this is just falling down. But the back side of this sheathing is coplanar to the front of the sill plate, and so our rim joist and everything will sit inside of there tightly and be right where you kind of want it to be. Over here it's 2 inches off at the front, not to mention that angle. I mean, this is really where you want what you want to do, basically, even though you don't want to do it. So this will be sent flush with that, and the room joist will set tight to it. And if you get down here and look someday, you'll see that the original home entryway and original, what looks like the original sill, it's relatively square here. And then the wonky ass concrete was plated the way that it should be plated, and it just comes way in right there. And all being part of this wall and this wall and this wall is all better than coming in here and digging to expose it, cutting, forming, pouring to replace it, making it square, trying to tie it all in, then cutting and starting and stopping the waterproofing stuff is all something you don't want to do. So you just don't point it out, and you just kind of live with it. So that's what we'll probably do there. But I guess what we're going to start with is setting up to drill and attach that plate and replace this one. And then maybe we can get the original sill on, and then it might be the end of my day, I don't know. Well, I wanted to try some video stabilization, but I can't have the wide lens with it. So we'll just stick to wide lens and me stumbling around the job site, lathering, and trying not to trip over things too much anyway. Sometimes it's funny. I had high hopes here. I went all the way back home to get the socket set, which I had taken from the site, and the impact driver, which I had taken from the site, ostensibly because we were done playing with nuts and bolts. But we weren't. And now I was able to pop that old piece off, and the longest stick that I had from the lumber stack is nowhere near long enough. In fact, it's only a tiny bit longer than the piece I removed. So I'll walk him over there, but the fact of the matter is, I think we're all done for today. I'm going to have to get an 8-foot stick, a 2x8, and I may as well get the two 8-foot 6x6s that I need, which are only really available treated. And I'm going to cut those down to make cribbing, to make most of the way up to the beam. So then on top of it, we'll put our heavy shore, and we'll lift the beam up that last little bit with a real sturdy arrangement, since these spindly little shores don't really have the cojones to do that. And so since we're going to the lumber store for one dumb stick, we'll get 3 dumb sticks tomorrow morning and pick up where we left off. In fact, I'm going to need a piece of Plizzle Whizzle. I got to put a top on there, and it really isn't super handy to put 4x8 sheets on the car. In fact, it's impossible. The sticks will go. So I don't need 4x8. I was thinking I might find a smaller. I probably won't find anything but a long rip at my house. So we will need to buy a full sheet, and that's okay. We'll get it here somewhere, somehow, and we'll put a surface on this. Probably get that done tomorrow. If not, I got to pull that stack apart in the back and fill this hole in the one in adjacent corner, because the bank run gravel delivery is so gosh darn affordable that I'm going to get 2 or 3 loads, because I can't have it till a few days from now, toward the end of this week. And the thing is, if I were to put all of that into these holes, or get down to looking at what it would take after I put some in that divot too, like I was saying, essentially when I do get a load of that bank run, maybe I'll get 2 or 3 if I can, and backfill around the house with that, like I was talking about. Basically close out the week with the garage packed up tight and flat with the workshop in it, and all the backfill around outside, and the floor here, and stairs up into the front door. And actually, if it was backfilled all the way around, I could throw a little gangplank up to the back door, or you got this door, and we got the one in the garage. So there's 4 ways out of the first floor in this house. Probably can't get more than one connected up to be easy to use, but yeah, there's a lot of dirt. I'd probably fill up to there, and again try to get the bank run in the last 3 or 4 feet on the outside of the building. So, but like that door, then probably not that door, because I'm not going to try and put a bunch of dirt fill around these windows that will end up having window wells, this one and that one. In fact, I've been thinking to myself, I'd like to put a window well over the bottom half of all of these windows and take the grade up to here. So the changes, see, the kind of feel sometimes like it's a little too high, And I think if our grade were to go up to there, it'd be just right. And then we'd have the bottom, halves of the windows would be in the window wells. I think that would look just right. See that? Versus too much foundation showing. Blah, blah, blah. More expense in those. They're not that crazy. But the point is that the backfilling that I'd be able to do wouldn't be completely all the way up, because we'd have to apply those first and then continue to fill up there. But at least to be able to walk up, there wouldn't be a hole that you're falling over into there. And once again, probably change all these plans by the time the week's out. But that's where I'm at today. For now, let's just watch me pick up my mess. Isn't that fun? I don't even know. I'll probably... I really want to just throw this all away, but I should probably set the millwork aside just in case. Probably not the door jamb. Safe enough to say the door jamb can be thrown away. This side of it's destroyed because there's pieces of it stuck to the top. That's not the greatest joint anymore. It already had a bunch of holes punched in it from the storm door, gas shock. The bottom was rotted out on and we absolutely cannot and would never put it back into that opening. So it's trash. We're going to get it out of here. Tools put it back in the basement, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, well, as you can see, it is possible to vacuum that stuff off of the stone. I am glad it is just the stone and not dirt. You just want to just dangle the tip very slightly off the end, off the ground. Just brushing the ground with your tip. And I've got a lot of experience with that, and so it helps with the suck job. But anyway, there's just a little bit left on the stone, and I got it out of the alcove downstairs. And I don't know why I've put it all in that tote. I just have. I already had a garbage practically full from the waste from today, and then I put one vacuum cleaner clean out load on top of it, and now I'm feeling like they're going to hate me because they normally like to see that type of thing in a bag or whatever, so it may have to be transferred to one. I need my little helper Edward to get back on the job site here, otherwise he's paying me an awful lot to play games with bagging garbage, but we'll use that stuff tomorrow. I don't know where I'm going with this right now. All the way down to the basement, only to dump it into a garbage can, only to bring that garbage can upstairs to get rid of. I don't know. It's not your problem. So let's just, with the magic of production, editing, and all of that, we'll come back tomorrow and continue work here. Alright, they dropped off my lumber order. I got some posts to be cut into cribbing so that we can lift. I got some 2x10 to make stringers and stair steps for temporary stairs out front. I got one 2x8 to replate the top surface. Oh, and I got a full sheet of CDX 3/4 for the subfloor top. We've got the Doug fir 2x8 for the joists and rim joists left over from, and I want to double check this, but we sistered all the joists on this side of the house. Oh, and we put the last of the stone in, Ed and I, so I could actually finally get this. I was thinking it'd be hard enough with just one guy, let alone just one hand, but no. These demo tubes, just as an aside, were a good investment. I got 6 of these. I think they're 10 feet long for $100 or something, I want to say. They would sleeve into one another, the one end, into the bell end or whatever. They had this, like, gasket, you would call it, and these, like, cast-in webbing straps, which are actually in pretty good shape still, the 2 ends, and, well, most of them had D-rings. And if they haven't, they've got something else. I guess both ends have them. And so, yeah, so then you could, like, use a carabiner once that end sleeves over to kind of keep it together. Anyway, nowadays you see, like, Brute garbage cans, yellow or orange or whatever. I've never looked at them that close. I'm going to go in that way. In the city, to send demolition debris all the way down safely, you can stack a bunch of heavy garbage can type components and chain through them so that they'll sleeve all together in a big stack, but as you lift one out, it won't come all the way out before the chain comes tight. So you can effectively just drop it down outside and then let it fall. I'm not sure that they do it that way, but to stack it all back up again, and then you can break out manageable weight groups of them to move it around with manpower. Whereas, and it can be far shorter. So there's downfalls. These are relatively light, but they're tough, and they're long, so you can't just put them in a vehicle or something. You could probably put as much length in 2 of those in the back of an ordinary vehicle the other way, using the newer style. So obviously they made quite a few improvements. If you have a failure of one of the units in the new style, you could just replace it, and it won't cut the shit out of you. Like, the edge of this is pretty ragged now, and the clear coat and the extra resin on the outside can bake off in the sun. The abrasion inside at a certain point wears it out from the inside out, and so I got them for a good price. However, you've seen that they were really effective on the site, and so you may look for something like that yourself. In fact, even like a 12-inch or 14-inch or 16-inch sonotube would work to do what we've used that for around here, because the bigger sonotube you get into, the more heavy-duty they actually are, and a lot of them would take as much abuse as that has been taking on one project, and then for the cost of it, well, that was huge and a great help. Whereas you don't need it to go the distance as a bigger investment than that. So that's the end of my advice there. We got the stone all in here. We got the block out. Ed topped this all up. We just need to top up the area where the bags are. But now I think what we'll do here eventually, I've brought this concrete in to make the rest of the pier. But eventually I'll sneak right up to the window here, and we'll set the mortar right from there into either the bucket. Yeah, likely the bucket. Or no, I'm sorry, we'll get the forks in, put a pallet, and put some plastic, and we'll set them right out into the pallet, right out the window hole, with maybe a little bit of help to stack them up here. But then they can be transported around, and the plastic can be folded up and around and over them, rather than just a tarp. But they can be fully bundled in plastic, and they shouldn't be any worse for wear. They have taken on some moisture down here, but they're still powder. You just don't want to leave them down on this humid stone. That's why you see them on pallets, and why you see them wrapped with plastic and stuff, just so that they don't take on as much humidity as as that would ruin them before they were going to be used. So we want to manage that. End of the day, they're $5, about $4 or $5, $6 a bag. So it's not the end of the world if we've got to buy more. It's just that we waste all of our effort. Blah, blah, blah. But we're getting to a point down here where once the garage is packed up tightly and smooth and flat, we can get basically everything out of here and moved up there, consolidated down, and, you know, consider it as to whether or not it needs to still be on the site, whether or not it still needs to be saved, or whether or not it's a meaningful, you know, contribution or whatever. And we could probably get the pod moved into the garage and stuff too. Firstly, I've got to get outside with my toolage and go back to what I was doing yesterday. So I guess I was going to add it right into the work as though I had never put it down at the end of the last little segment, but I ended up getting dragged into this spiel for yous. All right, back to work. All right, I got the old plate on here and nailed down to the new plate, which is bolted to the concrete. Now, you know, we looked at this discrepancy yesterday with how this needs to overhang on the right-hand side, you know, so that's how I've got it. And that's actually pretty convenient to be able to fix it like that, rather than being proud, rather than sticking out beyond this construction. I was thinking overnight, like, of all the things, this could be planed out if you ever put, you know, cultured stone or anything on this foundation down the road, or even just a colored mortar and pargit or whatever. This could be packed out and screeded with mortar and then have that put on, and anyway you lose the negativity of it or whatever. So, but now I see that we've got another fucking problem, and this is the point where, you know, folks start to get, between now and the end of the project, it's more and more of a a rush, because when you get down to one person, things go more slowly. When crews of people get things done. And when I looked at this project, I know everything's in my wheelhouse. I know that the timeline's going to work for me and that I can plug away at this stuff. And I don't even plan on it being perfect, but I do plan on some of the new stuff being perfect enough to work with. You know, like I knew that I'd have to make some kind of adjustments between the old and the new. I didn't think that they'd go all the way down to the new. So in this case, the new concrete does have a problem with being too far out. It exists outside of the framing here. You can see this is the plane of the stud wall, and that needs to come down and be flush with the plate. And there's a discrepancy of about 3/4 of an inch here, and I could pull that, but you start pulling that open and you start pulling the face of this out of plumb, and you start ripping the sheathing. A lot of times if it's plywood, it pulls out as one piece, but board by board, it starts to have to separate from the framing to make a straight shot. And then your jamb is a consistent thickness all the way down, so that becomes a problem in trimming to the jamb. There's a gap that opens, etc. And so you can't just kind of roll with this. You have to sort of figure it out. And so the concrete had to be out to here. Can't change it. So the new plate was there and the old plate was there, flush with it. But when we put in our rim joist, which I expected now to begin the part of the project where things kind of not fall together, but they can all come together in a pretty typical construction fashion. So we come out, and I'm looking to be, so since this butted and this passed, I was going to butt the two edge rim joists into the front and have it pass, and so we've laced the corner. So I made a piece the exact length from old plate to old plate, and I put it in here, and I come into the back of the sheathing. Now I've stopped for some reason. I guess I'm tight at the back in there, but there's still a gap to here, and this is the this should be flush. This has to be flush. You can't have a shelf out here. And you can't be just adding a thickness here to make this flush, because again, in all of the composition, the trims and the jamb for a door opening, that discrepancy in terms of thickness is a real problem. Basically, the wall needs to be the same thickness as best as you can make it all the way around a door opening. Otherwise, we could, and it also is different in thickness from here to there. And so I might be able to but again, any kind of pushing that you can do, the amount that we're pushing this out to get to there is the amount that we're tearing something apart to achieve it. And over here I might be able to live with forcing a light 1/2 of an inch, but this is a heavy inch, and so that becomes an issue there. And so instead of just being flush here, 2, 3 pieces there, 4 or 5 joists, cut a piece of plywood, slide it in there, and be walking on it in an hour and thinking about making stairs, now I can stop and figure this all out. And let me just say, because what happens under these circumstances is it starts to get chased all the way back to the genesis of an idea. So, why did I incorporate this full depth area under this entryway into the basement proper? Well, to start with, whether or not we ended up having to support this, we had chosen to keep it. We weren't ripping it off. And so we held it up, whether we needed to or not, whatever. So it's standing off the face of the house, so it needs to sit on something or have something built up underneath of it when we come back down onto the old foundation. So if the new foundation. So if the new foundation just came straight through one homogeneous solid wall right through here and kept on going, and we bring the house down and we set it down, then we have a big excavated hole here like we had before, right? And so then we fill this in, and it settles to the degree that we saw this settle. So then we fill it in some more like this. But this still has to settle. It will be a year or two here before, with all perfect conditions, if we were to power compact this and everything, for it to be super, super tightly packed to where you could come in and form and pour a concrete block against this foundation wall here, or form like a flat slab and stuff like that. Problem is, now that is just sitting on the ground here, and the moisture content from things like this doesn't have any gutters on it. So the water that sheets off of this, that getting into that gutter that's all grown in, all this water goes directly down here and is deposited all around. And so if you have a concrete slab there on which this thing is built here, that rises and falls with the freezing cold temperatures, and it breaks off of the wall, and the whole thing basically respirates all to pieces, and it was all for nothing. So what do you do? Well, if you wanted to pour the basement wall full depth to the bottom, and rip the old concrete block stairs and stuff like that off of here without excavating beneath it a lot, which we ended up doing because it did go down into the ground some. But if you start with what you've got for depth there, and you just dig down a little bit more so that you're 4 feet down in the way we did the shallower excavation for the garage, and we copy what happened with the garage. So we bring the footer out over and back again on that, and then we form up walls out over and back again on that. Then you've formed a footer and you've formed and poured walls, even though, yeah, you saved yourself a few 3 or 4 feet of concrete wall and material. All the rest of the work there is basically the same. The hole to install the beam is basically the same. When I come and if you try to come and do that all before you set the house down, it's all the same work to get to this point, and then you'd have to fill it solid with dirt through the front door opening here and endeavor to pour a concrete cap in here up underneath the baseboard and everything, and up onto this here, up on top of it, to get back to what you had here, which was a step that won't meet code, likely, if you're not careful. That can be too small of a step. It could be touchy in here, so you got that to consider. But you get a concrete top on this solid dirt-filled 4-foot deep footing concrete blister thing that's additional to the solid basement wall that you can't get into it from in the basement, in theory. And now what have you got? You're back to a freezing cold monolith. Freezing cold air beating on this surface, and this surface, whipping around here all the time, freezing cold, freezing this whole space being freezing cold again, and the front door that pisses, has no gasket, isn't a real exterior door, is just constantly trading cold air and stuff back and forth in here. And for all the expense in doing what it was that you did, you've constructed basically what you used to have, which is, 3/4 of the way to just doing it this way. Alternatively, we could go down the full depth completely to the bottom and fill it all up again and try to cap it all before you set this thing down or after you set this thing down. And you're still just a freezing cold entryway that doesn't make any sense. And so you can't build anything on top of the grade, and in doing anything where you've excavated and formed and poured a footer in walls, to that point, it makes total sense to do this much more and incorporate it into the envelope of the home and put a nice exterior door on the front of it. Because doing that before would have just kept this a freezing cold, monolith that's a thermal mass that's just sucking the heat out of the front of your house. This way, passively forevermore, it will work as an airlock and a thermal barrier and be incorporated in, and we'll have a wall framed around inside of it with insulation value, so you can have a little more space, but this wall out here won't be trading all kinds of heat out into the atmosphere anywhere near as quickly as it was when it was one just big thermal mass of freezing cold in western New York. So we get down to choosing to go to the full depth, to incorporate it into the basement space, and to put a new floor surface on top of it. And the thing is, well, you could have gone to half depth, and so it could have been like a dirt level in here with a threshold opening like one of these windows have here, and so you could it's open to the airspace of the basement, and it can cruise around in here and create, basically, for all intents and purposes up here, all the same effects. However, it's unusable dirt surface in here, and so I just chose to go all the way down and make a little alcove in here that may or may not become handy in the future. It was an executive decision. But there's so much of the same work to be doing in all cases that it's like where to point the last little fraction of the investment to best serve everybody involved. This is where you end up. But I hadn't planned on this thing being constructed so weirdly, coupled with the first and serious significant failure of the concrete contractor ends up being front and center, the way you walk up and approach the front door to the entire project, right there, to the extent that it's out of square. And in the same way, they plotted off the wrong anatomy here, because this was all rotten, and he didn't realize that the back of, the back of this sheathing, rather than the face of the siding, was where he needed to pull the laser line down, put a nail in the footer, ultimately set the form, and then when the form is filled, the surface of the concrete ends up coplanar to the back surface of the sheathing. Failure. And so now, I think I'm going to cut it out of my way to get this surface in here and get a flat top on it. But there's nothing else that you could do here, I don't think, until you take the siding off the front of this thing all the way around, all the sheathing boards off the front of it all the way around, extend the two sidewalls framing by a little bit, enough to get there in terms of flush, and then frame a new front wall on with new opening, which we needed to do anyway, and installed the door in it. But again, like I said, you know, earlier in the series, we're not going to go to all those lengths 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right in a row. We don't need to go that far right now. We just need to be able to walk up and walk on it. So I think even rather than just cutting anything away, I am going to try and shove this over or smash that enough to open a gap here and get the floor relative to the plates and concrete the way that it should be. And it's going to not even be a square, I don't think. We'll see, because I'm taking great pains to make the 3 edges of this line up to the 3 walls. Although out at the front I'm not. Anyway, I don't know how square or unsquare the surface of plywood is going to be. I was going to say that whole thing may be very square and well constructed. It's just that it rotted at the front corners, and the guy who was pulling the laser line down to line up the concrete wall with it wasn't clear on where he was going up front, and I didn't want to meddle and get in there. And so I think that it's probably far more square than the concrete ended up being. It's just weird to put your finger exactly on what went wrong here. But the point is, I've got to fix it and keep moving, which is what you're going to watch me do. And I just felt like I was standing there scratching my head at the end of the time lapse, and figured I'd share with you my issues here. I'd love to just put this right where it belongs, make the 2 sides, and keep right on the movement. But now we've got more customization, and it's no one's fault. But this is where you can't anticipate that when you're costing out a project. And if you're not careful, if it happens in most of the steps, you can get really out of whack in terms of the project budget. So we've got to be effective here. Let's see what happens. Alright, so that worked out pretty well. I don't know what to stand on here. Try not to kill myself or get a sledgehammer handle up the bee-hole. I'm heavy on this side. I'm just where I want to be over here. We ended up 1/4 of an inch basically heavy there, because the end of the stick is cut square, but you see the bottom of it sits open by 1/4. The face of the house to the top surface isn't at 90, so you cut the stick at 90. It stops short. And at the bottom it holds us 1/4 there, and it holds us 1/4 here. So even though the tape measure was accurate, we got forced out 1/4 there by the plumbness or lack of plumbness in the face. Actually, it's probably more likely that the concrete runs uphill, or that these layers and stuff aren't sitting completely as tight together as possible out here. But I got to quick dig him back out, and that's what I used math and just made this piece and this piece what they should be if they were to straighten out, and left 1.5 inches if it would push this out to flush. So he rolled in and did what I wanted. He rolled in and got screwed up there, so I got to dig him back out, make that adjustment, put him back in, and then we need a ledger for the edge of the plywood, and then we need a couple joists in here on a 16-inch on-center layout. But essentially, those don't need a hanger because they're sitting on the plate. They're normally screwed in to the end grain just to hold them from sliding up and down on the rim and tipping over. It's not really that great of a connection, but the point is, I can't get in there and do that without taking some siding off, so I think we're in for doing that much finally on the sides to get them fastened. The joist into the rim. The rim also needs to be fastened into the sill, and I can tow from inside and go straight down, but I'm kind of pointing my screw down and out of the building, which I'd rather not. I guess over here I could screw right up through and into the rim joist, which is a nice feature of this being otherwise in every other way completely back-assward and wrong. I should also trim that little nail off before somebody doesn't know he's there and gets hooked and cut on that. This is also something while I'm right here, the gappage. See, this has got a gasket to the new plate, but if I ever do this again, I will use spray glue and roll gasket out onto the new plate before we set the old plate down onto it, because believe it or not, see that? See how much gappage there is despite the weight that's loaded onto it and the pressure? This is all gappage, and we're going to want to go around inside with the lights off at some point and identify where any daylight's coming in and use spray foam with a flattened tip to try and drive spray foam into everything. And then I think when we're done, we better try and dust off the face of the old, I guess it's up and underneath the old plate. So maybe on the inside is the place to do it, but between the new and old plate, using that zip system flashing tape to stop any draftage from coming in and carrying heat away with a Delta T. I had been thinking about doing it outside because that stops any little beetles and bugs and spiders and stuff from getting anywhere into the structure, whereas doing it on the inside, they can build into those gaps and cracks and technically be in your house before they're stopped by the tape, as well as all of the draftage being stopped. But all that little detritus, the dry little wings and nests and bodies and stuff, you know, this type of stuff is the stuff that catches fire. It's just it's just super tender. And, you know, that's where the difference is made between something that doesn't cause the whole house to burn down and something that does. In behind the clapboard in there that was just covered by the new siding, every one of the negativities in the clapboard, you better believe, the real clapboard, not this clapboard, but by going over it, every negative space in the original clapboard underneath has just got full of cocoons and nests and webs and stuff that there's only more and more of them over time. They don't go anywhere because they don't get eroded away because they're protected from the elements, and you end up with just a mat of ultra dry tinder that if you get a lightning strike or a spark from, you know, depending on the place where we're talking, gets thrown up and underneath something or whatever, and it can run along underneath in that air gap and get plenty of oxygen and plenty of tinder to truly grow into a considerable amount of flame before, you know, getting started on something more substantial, and finally it's too late when you find out about it. I hate to be such a so anal about that, but I'm just, you know, letting you know that these are all things that are on my mind here while I'm working and when to best address them. Back to the task at hand, I guess I pulled a piece out, cut him down some, put him back. And then I guess not only have I got to take the siding off, the plastic, I've got to get down through the old siding that's on there also. And actually, I shouldn't fasten through the sheathing, through the rim joist and into the joist. It should go through the joist and into the joist, and then the sheathing should be applied in a best case scenario. So how all to create that, I may end up just towing it from inside and towing into the face of the house. These inside corners are going to be kind of a pain to do anything about, although I can tow from the one end, just as it's, just imagine this was a plate on the floor and this was a stud, you know, like if we were like that, and you would tow down into it 4 times, since it's a 2x8. So 4 tows here, a tow every foot, maybe 3 or 4 down both sides, 3 or 4 across the front. I set the joists in and tow them. Again, everybody's stacked flat and pressed tightly down. It's just you need to be fastening things together. You can't be leaving stuff to float for all of time. So how to get all that done, I probably do it that way to save myself digging in from outside, since that just opens more of a can of worms. Man, there's a lot of talking to do here. I just feel like you go and do this and then nobody knows the kind of thinking that went into it, the decision-making process and what you have to do. See, look at the gappage. Mad gappage. And it'll be a best case scenario here when we do open up the whole front of this and extend the framing out and kind of sheath it and then leave it like that or whatever, because this whole area should be flashed as a door pan all the way down the face of this, down the face of both of those after they've been foamed, and right on, you know, 1/2 inch or more beyond the edge of the concrete to make 100% waterproof gasket. You know, some people would say, well, make that out of treated, make this out of treated too, and just make it all treated. Treated doesn't stop it from being moist, and moisture content can't happen within a certain envelope in a home. The green plate, the treated, is used to make the transition from concrete but immediately goes to all white lumber, and that's because things need to stay dry. You can't be making stuff out of treated lumber because it can get wet periodically because it's treated. It shouldn't be getting wet. If it can get wet and it doesn't rot because it's treated, it's against something else somewhere. Unless we're going to frame the whole thing out of treated, and it contributes that moisture to that white lumber, and that white lumber gets to rotting because it isn't treated. Therefore, we shouldn't be planning on anything being wet. And as I did consider making this piece out of treated, but then I don't have any treated that's this thick. This needs to be a bit thicker than that, and next thing you know, it's like shouldn't be counted on to be a treated lumber. Shouldn't be getting wet. You shouldn't be in your basement here looking up into these spaces that should be insulated as they will be, taking the insulation away and having moisture content. That's big no. So long story short, this is how we're going to build this, and we'll just keep working up from below, working with what we have to work with for geometry to make everything else, and we'll just somewhere in here we're going to average the two together and walk away from it for now, because it's just becoming more involved than I had thought it might become. All right, I had been planning on, and that's why I left the line but didn't cut it, I'd been planning on cutting this threshold up in order to slide one solid piece of subfloor all the way back to there. But the thing is, to be sure that I can slide it in there, I need to take a little bit more than what I need to start the plywood in, which means that it has a gap between the bottom edge of it and the top of the plywood, 1/16 of an inch if I'm lucky, close to 1/8 probably at one end or the other. And this hangs out in space like an inch or two. Given its age and everything, I just don't want it to start breaking off, because it can travel a little bit, and every time somebody stands on it, or it bouncing or anything like that. And so I was thinking I'd keep it intact and just fit a notch. I am going to take the tail of it out that sits back in there. I'll go to here, but basically notch the subfloor and slide it. So now I'm seeing that the notch won't sit on anything then. Now, even if I had slid the plywood in there, I might have been able to angle my screws and catch this. So now I need to put a second layer here, which is no problem. I can put another piece in this length, so I nail this one in first and nail that one into it. Then I have something for the notched plywood to be anchored to out here, because asking that to not make it to that joist and come from this joist right in a walk area, it's going to bounce constantly. If anything, bounce away from the threshold that I leave intact. So it'll be just a constant bounciness relative to the rigidity of the threshold. So this is all part and parcel of how to decide here, what to do. And I snapped this line based on what I cut for clearance here, which is obviously going to be, quite a bit on this side, and even more than I need over here. So more accurately, now that I have a piece in here, or when I do, and not before I put the second piece in, if I wanted to measure a hair over 3/4 of an inch from this surface and put a pencil line and a pencil line and snap a fresh line and cut that, because if I add any thickness here, then I can't cut as deep as I need to do to cut with the circular saw. I could cut that out and then if somebody replaces this door someday, they don't take everything away and see that they have to cut and add a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, which is like 6 1/2 dozen. I'm just really torn on taking that much material out of that threshold, but I also hate the idea of fitting a piece of subfloor, because really, your subfloor layer, once your joists go, your concrete foundation, whatever you got, your plate, your rim joist, and your joists go on, and then one homogeneous solid surface in the subfloor is applied before any more things, or any interior or exterior walls, anything, are built on top. And so, in my mind, your subfloor is not notched to go around some kind of thing, like a piece of millwork or a door unit. You notch that shit out of the way, which it would have had to have been if it was to come in here and be installed after we've put our subfloor on, in the event that this house was being built in the right order. And so I think I've basically tucked myself back around during the course of this blather into, yes, taking away the door, putting the subfloor in so that, you know, it's very close to the surface of the floor inside. And so if that's 3/8 of an inch hardwood, which it likely is, below that is subfloor board, our subfloor boards. And if anything, it's a little higher because the joists in this house are 7 1/2, not 7 1/4. So that's interesting. I am trying not to have to cut the door opening any higher and closer to both the inner roof surface and the outer. And so that little 1/4 of an inch in using new 2x8 rather than older 2x8 is worth downplaying the surface just a touch, just to keep us down as much as possible. Otherwise, I might have used all old 2x8 to do this in an endeavor to be perfectly coplanar with that interior floor. But we're certainly not going to put the same finished floor out here, and we're going to work around this threshold for now. And in the future, this doesn't need to be an exterior door with a threshold. It can be an interior door where the slab swings right over the finished floors of both rooms with a small transition strip between them, because this is not keeping the cold air out anymore. Once again, this is our exterior door with our aluminum threshold, and this is part of inside the house. And so in the future, if somebody wants to finish right on through here, make this a nice kind of nicer entryway and stuff, and do like a tile medallion or a whatever they do out here, whatever. Yeah, I think I'm going to end up plotting off the top of this new 2x8 a hair more than 3/4 of an inch, or to exactly 3/4 of an inch, and cutting the line to leave myself a hair's breadth. If I don't like it, I can pump some construction adhesive in there, or some caulking, or apply it to the subfloor before I zoop it in there. So that's what we're going to do. I am going to work off of this to make a line, cut it while I've got the ability to do that with the depth, add a second piece. I might just do that, because then I can directly fasten down into it rather than towing, and it won't hurt anything to have a more robust area directly outside the front door. I certainly have the material, so we'll probably throw a doubler in there, and then a 1, 2, and then the plywood, and then we'll start looking at the stairs outside, I promise. Alright, so happily that ended up being less material by more than 1/4 of an inch than I had anticipated having to take. I haven't tried to put 3/4 plywood in there yet, which I should probably try with a scrap before I haul the full sheet in here and try to get it to go. Worst case scenario, we got to take a hair's breadth more, back off again, so I should check that. But then it was like, where to put the layout. Should I hang my tape on the outside face and start doing 16-inch centers? Or should I go to the trouble to plot this layout out and around this feature and just put whatever next, actually after the rim joist? No. Well, yeah, maybe. We should be like this first one in here anyway and then keep going. However, I chose to work from this side out, because as we travel out this way, their lengths grow because the two side walls aren't at 90 degrees to the front of this building, and they're not necessarily parallel, and then the front of this thing is justified to the concrete wherever it lies. So I wanted to work from an existing thing and continue the layout out and just let it peter out here wherever. If I start working back this way from the wonkiest kind of spot, then I'm compounding the place where they come together, the confluence. So I hung my tape on the far side of this, and then made a mark at 16 inches and put my layout on the left hand side. But now I'm thinking, if someday somebody does take the door all out and everything and wants to come right through, the thing is they're not going to re-subfloor. This gets a little bit, you know, a real nice job would be, if, you know, so that somebody, if they find a layout inside and they're doing something right along, it doesn't change when they come out into this space. It's the same layout. Which just means that rather than being on the left-hand side of the rim joist, which is 1 3/4 inches because it's old lumber, plus 3/4, which is, you know, 2 1/4, or I'm sorry, 2 1/2 to here off. This is where I started my tape. So it could move to the left 2 1/2 inches, all these marks, and then we'd be on the same layout as the rest of this floor, if in fact the rim joist is on 16-inch centers, and it wasn't in fact put on as a rim joist, and then their tape was pulled from the far side going to the first 16 all the way down, and like it looks like from this guy to the rim is 16, but that may be the difference over the course of this whole place if they pulled their layout from the far side. And I can't see at a glance. I can with camera and tape measure upside down, try to hook on like that, and it looks like 16 is out here anyway. So if on the left hand side, that's not the layout. That's not the it wasn't pulled. They didn't pull layout from this end, I don't think. So without worrying about it too much, I got to make sure plywood fits in there, and if it does, I'll just make 2 more joists. I'll measure at these locations. I did the layout first rather than cutting them because I'm going to specifically measure the distance between here and there on that layout mark so that the piece fits tightly, because to go one way it won't fit, to go the other way it will be too loose, right? So framing 101. Let's get that much done. Okay, I used a toe at the top just to put it right on my pencil line. Then it can be pivoted and toted from the side. I haven't attached this one yet because if I run into a problem here with clearance, I want it down to recut because it sticks out a lot more and I can't get the depth like I was saying. So I'll leave that and come up and nail it in from below once the plywood's in. That way it can be, it may even be laid down, I guess, if that becomes handy. and then like tipped back up into it. Insulation keeps falling down. However, now I'm realizing that, let me get out of here and explain it. I was hoping to put the plywood in one piece, but that would mean that I'd have to, hang on, fuck it. Ugh. So, I had hoped to just slide the plywood in, because I had just been thinking that for some reason or another I'll end up having to rip this open from outside, but I've managed to get by here without doing any of that. Now driving this rim joist out has kicked this out, so this is going to come off anyway, and so, you know, taking the, I have to cut through everything to get the plywood to be able to come in from the front, and cutting through the plastic J channel and the plastic outside corner to do so ruins the stick all the way up, and both of those are underneath the clapboard all the way up, which means to do anything more than just cut and slide the plywood in and keep going, you absolutely have to reside this, which you kind of have to do anyway. I just don't see the other way to do it would be to come in with a half of a sheet and slide over into there, but we've also got to go into there, so we've got to come in all the way, which we might have the room to do in the middle here and go up and then over, but we don't have the ability to put the second piece in after the first piece. Not to mention we have a seam in the middle, and those two across this span as a homogeneous piece have a certain amount of strength, but when you slice them independently, the edges of that can tip back and forth, so you'd end up with a 2x4 or a 2x6 block in here and in here and in there, so that once we get the two pieces down, it can be screwed down into those. But that's kind of ugly, and it doesn't save us getting around, you know, after we cut the piece that we make in half to do that. We'll find out we probably have to cut this stuff out of the front anyway. I don't want to cut in from the side, because I'd like to think that we can keep everything about the sides, and we just need to extend the front out to the degree that we shove the rim joist out. So, for expediency, I might pull these. I may try, because the plastic will bend to some degree, so I just don't know. Once you bend it up at 90 degrees to like clear it, it's just going to kink and have a permanent like this here. You know, it has a body, a witness mark from having been bent hard one time. And I didn't finish off the bees. I've been playing it cool, but there still are some bees, so like pulling all the siding all the way up to the top and around the door just to get it out of my way from down here is irritating me. The idea of that. I think I'll probably just cut this off and cut that off. Maybe at least the trim, because I think the trim is the biggest thing holding this boards. They went to nothing in the outside corner. I took everything away on their outside corner from one another, and then I put this stuff back but didn't anchor through them. So I think if I just cut the trim off by reaching through in here high enough and take that piece out of there, there's a chance that 1-2 tongue and groove boards will fall down, because they're not attached to this anymore. And then a little bit of plastic, and then we'll just have the corner that we maybe can force out of the way out that way, and the J channel, maybe we can just, worst case scenario, he gets monkeyed up, but, and then I've got more than I can really do here with one person. Let me try that first to make sure that's the way I'm going to enter this thing, and then when I'm sure that I can get in there, I'll make the piece of plywood and slide it in, and once it's down, I'll go down and put that doubler, apply him, and then I'm gonna have to find this layout somewhere up here, because this is 16 inches on center from that joist back inside. So anyway, maybe I'll just throw the square on and put some lines on the drywall real quick that'll translate back down to the plywood, so I can put a couple screws in the plywood in the front edge here, and that's probably about as far as I'll get today. Let's see. Okay, problem solved there. We were going to need a new amount of J channel to go around the new door opening anyway. This clapboard is basically trashed from having the newel post on it. And so the corners are okay, and a little bit more of this white siding. As white as it is not anymore. This being the lee side, this is the northern side of the house, so if anything it's got mildew and dirt, and this was, I don't know, I think we puked out the, when he was cleaning out the concrete pump truck and blew a big turd out on the ground here. I think that was the splatter from that. So it looks like it'll wash off. Not to mention Mr. Robin, and the overall state of the affairs here to begin with wasn't all that perfect. So, all things considered, now we can go straight in there with a piece of plywood. The only problem is, not only is this piece on this side, 43.5 would be safe. And on this side, he said, running his tape measure like an expert, this is 44 5/8 to be safe. Across the joist across here, not so add 3 for the 2 rim joists. That was 59 1/8, and then this across plus 3 is what 62 1/8. And this is 63.5. Where are we here? Right about there, 63.5. So a difference of, 1 3/8 front to back, side to side, and none of the corners are at 90 degrees. And we can't set the full sheet in there with one flat side, for example, flush to the, or tight to the front of the house, overhanging a little bit here, and scribe, which would be my first sort of inkling. However, that would mean we'd have to cut the sides out of here just to float a full sheet in, which I'm not comfortable doing. So what we need to know are, at the very least, I need to pull my pencil further than it'll go off of my rig that I'm not wearing, because I'm really feeling it for some reason today, and I'm not sure why. So, if from above, the front of the house is here, there's no telling whether the front of this thing is parallel, this here, is parallel to it or not. In fact, it probably is not, because as we said, this length and this length are slightly different from one another, and if anything, I didn't taper that on purpose, so if anything, this is narrower at the back than at the front. So what we need here are this length, this length, this length, and this length, and we need one of these diagonals at the very least. Nice to have them both, because if we can put 4 points in space that meet this, 4 points in space that meet this criteria, and these diagonal lengths are as they are measured out here, we know we've made ourselves the piece, and then all we have to do is make sure that we put the right side against the right surface, and we've got it upside down or right side up is another thing that we want to be careful about. So how to measure these 4 things accurately and get one, if not both of those, when I've got to look straight down at the corner of the tape, and I can't do so because it's underneath the edge over in the back in both cases. In fact, it's underneath the edge here as well. It's a good question. String can be used to pull it tightly from one to the other, and then hold on to that area of the string and take, but then you got to make sure the string isn't stretching, and you got to clamber in and out of here and go to where the board is laid out. It's really something. I will get back to you. Okay, this just goes to show you why I was dragging my feet on using a T-bevel, which is just a way in which to save a given angle. So I walk up to this thing. Ostensibly, this is a straight, flat side. It's 63.5 inches long, and then I set up and grabbed the angle of the corner, and you can loosen and tighten up, so I was real careful with that. I brought it over and I slapped it on. This is the front edge of the piece that we're going to make. I came over here, and that was the very slight angle that it was at, and so I threw that on, and then I extended it with a straight edge, which is just that angle piece from the storm door. I did the same thing at the back, and then I measured from the front corner to the back, and I put that measurement on this line, and then I set the T-bevel in here. Now we're just losing accuracy. See, it's only 6 inches long. I haven't got a 2 or a 3 foot leg on both sides. That'd be a nicer way to do this. But in getting it there, and then I threw that much of a line on there, and then I extended that line with a straight edge, and that's across the back. So then I measured from corner to corner across the back, and I started my measurement here on the line, and I came to here, and it was there, and then I went to the back corner and got that T-bevel, and I brought the T-bevel out and put it on here and lined it up now. And I know it doesn't look perfect, but I made it as perfect as I could. And I came back, and I was supposed to be pretty darn close to 63.5, which is the measurement I need at the front, and we're the better part of 3 inches, if we're more than 2 inches off from there at this current angle. And so there's a small amount of error going around this corner, and error going around that corner, and error going around that corner, and by the time we get here, they don't meet up. So we can't do it that way, which is why I wouldn't normally attack it that way in any case. Angles and stuff is all going into the math world, and then going back out of the math world onto the piece you're trying to make, where if you can scribe or take measurements of the application and make the piece's measurements in that location match, well, then you can be sure that the piece you're making fits your application. It's that pivoting to the theoretical where you're holding on to the corner angle and stuff. And so it's almost 4:30. I like to work till about 6. I got the bags of concrete that have to come inside out back, at least. And I was going to start my day mixing concrete and leaving it to set up, because I'm definitely not feeling that kind of frisky right now. It's hot and humid, and it's been a full day anyway. So tomorrow we'll start with mixing up the concrete for that pier extension. I got to bring the bags in and only just get them out of the weather, even though we probably won't get any weather. Clear skies. God, I don't even want to do that much. I want to just leave them sit outside. But that's how tiring it is. Just, you've watched me clamber in and out, up and down. I got to vacuum up more insulation that fell out. And I got to thinking, watching the footage from last night, trying to hold it up in there was probably possible, but I'd have to have made like some thin sheet metal, 14.5-inch wide, like giant angle that was deep enough when applied to the face of the drywall to reach over in there and hold, and thick enough material to hold the stuff from falling down, and slid one of those around each of the studs before I started trying to cut them off, and then it's in the way of cutting them off, and I'm tattering up the edge of it, and if I didn't want to nail it into the drywall, which isn't a great connection when it's bouncing around anyway, trying to nail through it, I could tape it, but if the tape was something I could depend on, then in pulling the tape off, it rips the paper and the paint, and so there really just is no way to keep that loose insulation from falling down and out of the wall. It's only after you've cut the studs off that you could throw a piece of Luan plywood or anything like that up and screw into the ends of them to hold it up in there, but it's in the cutting of them off when the stuff is falling out, so you just can't keep it in there. And so I don't regret letting it come down out of there, because it just isn't anything that was worth trying to save in there. It'd be nice to think you could, but I think it's a lot of effort. And so it will need some insulation when we get all done. Yeah, and so if you don't want to go to a bunch of extra work, you can carefully cut like the first foot down the wall out of the top of both sides, pour it, top it up with what you need, and then put the piece of drywall back in, and you just got to finish the seams, and or you could take the whole piece down. And so for our purposes, we're just getting ahead of ourselves here. How to get that piece of plywood cut to fit in here. You can make a cardboard template. I could bring cardboard back with me tomorrow and make it out of multiple pieces so I could slide. I've got some big cardboard, slide it until the flat edge stops at the back, slide it over keeping the flat edge at the back until it stops either in the first point out here or over there, and then take a measurement of how out of square it is and put that measurement over here and recut it so that it does indeed come over and fit from front down this side and hang long, then cut the edge of it here so I've got 3 sides in one piece here, and then put a second piece on and do the same thing. Go to the back, slide over, find the discrepancy, measure over, snap a new line, cut it, slide it over until you're sure that you're fit down that side and the back, then scribe the front, and then they're overlapping, and so I just tape them together, and then I take the piece out and I take it to the plywood and I lay it down and I trace it and I copy it out of plywood and I come back and I slide it right in here. So that's probably the next safest bet. However, I'm not just going to go home just to get cardboard just to come back, although there's a bunch of boxes sitting there, but I don't want to do it out of a bunch of pieces like that. I'll bring one nice big flat piece. So I guess we'll get the concrete bags moved inside and we'll vacuum up this insulation from the floor and all around in here. Nothing you guys haven't seen, so I'll save you watching that. And we'll just come back when we're ready to get serious about this situation here. Alright, well, Ed came by after we got done shooting yesterday and made us our cribbing blocks, which I appreciate. He must have done that this morning, actually, because I see the batteries on the charger. This must have been his trade. He couldn't resist making the pattern of there, and he cut the piece too, so it looks like it'll fit. It might be a honeymoon fit, as my... Yeah, we're gonna come up just as we get to the I don't know if it'll expose in there, but just as we get to the end of the sheathing board, and then the clapboard siding comes in the last couple of layers. If we're pushing the sheathing board out with the fitment of this, we slam into that siding and get stuck on it, which is what I think is happening back in there. So I'm just going to take 1/4 of an inch off of one whole side of this thing to start with. But that's fine. I'd rather have some to cut off than have to put some back on. And this piece came with this weird missing. This is a CDX, which means this is a C quality side, non-sanded, no knots. And if sometimes I see a CDX, they have a football fill on the, if there is a knot. The underside of it is the D side. C side. You know, what's going on here? D side. It's got some of these bad boys on her. So it's good he's got the right side. He noted the front. So, like I say, I'll take a, yeah, he left the line and stuff like that, which is fine. So he's just playing it safe. I'll take a little off, we'll slide it in. I've got the concrete bags moved in yesterday before I left. I brought the, whoa, I brought the hoe. I don't know if you, doesn't matter. There's the hoe. Anyway, so we'll make that up to the pier in a little bit, but see if we can get this in place.
that ought to do her. I ended up just using all 6 bags. I had figured that I was thinking about maybe 4, but I grabbed the 6 and told myself I'd just use them all. That way I'm not carrying them back out of here and taking them back for money. That's a situation where the weight of it and the time spent and its overall cost per bag, which is like, I don't even know if it's 10 bucks. It might have been between $8 and $12 a bag. Anyway, well worth just putting the whole thing there. It, you know, isn't a beauty seam, but I figured if anything, I'll probably, with my luck, I want to be right between the two in terms of where I end up putting this bad boy. So I wanted to even do this sooner rather than later, but I think it'll work out just fine. It'll be next week before we're trying to move this post over probably, and that puts us 5 days or something. This is a 72-hour before you can put car weight on, like what they probably figure is a 4-inch slab. So 5,000 psi, walk on it in 12 hours. I'm not going to get the bags out and kick a bunch of silica dust out, but anyway, after 5 days, being a foot thick, in kind of optimum, it isn't terribly humid, and it's like 70 to 80 degrees every day, so lately anyway. We'll see. I may do a check in an hour or so and put a final, like, try to get some of the, just use it as a practicing, just use it as an exercise. It's not too bad, you know, but I'm not a mason, and if it was anything more complicated than a big turd mixed correctly as per manufacturer specifications, for example, construction with mason techniques and materials, I would just, like I say, or like I've already done, hired it out to somebody. I wonder what splattered the wall over there. Did I accidentally fire the hose in this direction? I'll have to watch that and see if it dries up. Because it kind of looks oily, but I don't think I've had any oil stuff happening here. Anyway, alright, let's take a bit off of that plywood and slide it into place. I want to put glue in there too, so I guess we'll do a lunge and get some glue. We're going to need a caulk gun. That's one of the things we haven't got. So, well, may as well go home and get a lunch, get the caulk gun, come back, get the subfloor in, start making some stairs. Well, all I had to do was flatten the sheet as we went in back there. The crevice itself is perfect size. As far as the fitment, you know, under the threshold, in my mind, that looks pretty darn good. And of course, you got finished floor on top of this, so it just doesn't look hacky when you get in there. It wasn't hard to maintain that level of fitment. But any more than that, it would have been like a bear to beat this piece in, and it's like then you have to go back and take a slight little bit more off. I basically take a blade off, then you take almost 1/8 of an inch again just to make, which is smarter. This ended up a little bit shorter here than, you know, as far as a gap, that's tighter than on the right. But again, some shoe molding as well as, you know, once you get the we do have to get, let's see if I can get a sole plate for the wall. Yeah, it ought to go in there. I gotta get a sole plate in to the wall, and that's where it'll be. That, I mean, I can't really fasten almost
at all. I could go down and from below, I guess I could put a screw up into it from below. But I think that in the end, I may take this piece of drywall and like hinge it open like a book, and or try to take it down all in one piece, and suck out all the rest of that loose insulation. Put like rock wool R15 bats in at least the walls, because I'm going to be in the front wall as well, so the side walls, and then I can do all the attachment that it should kind of have at the bottom. And so it's 6 and 1/2 dozen whether I even put those in right now. I really just kind of want to get this down and the stairs on. And then I've got other stuff I want to do here by the end of this week. We want to backfill away from the house with the dirt pile, and then backfill near the house with the bank run, and flatten and pack up the garage, and move at least all my workshop into it, if not looking at moving the pod into it, because in that case the pod could go away and stop costing us it's $260 some a month or whatever. So yeah, better we get rid of that. And then once everything's out of the basement, we can start and get that pole, move over onto that pier next week, and that'll be kind of next week. So end of this week, I'm not that concerned with the front of this entryway or any other messing around here. They're going to try and come down and do a cursory like clean out of some more stuff that they could probably live without now that they've lived without it for months. I've been encouraging them to just keep making a bigger pile over there, and we'll trundle that out with a dumpster. And so a full width set of stairs here that's perfectly safe and ordinary is on the docket for today. I guess I forgot to mention how I had been hoping to subfloor glue this. I haven't made sure to show you what I would pick at the store, because it just is so much better than that liquid nails crap. Anyway, I can't apply it to this framing and then slide this whole thing into place. It's really designed to be pushed down onto by the subfloor coming down from above. So we'll use screws to hold this down, even though a ring shank nail would be probably fine as well. I'm just trying not to get any creaking here and to have it all really nice and tough. So best case scenario is screw it down, I guess, is all I've really got. And we'll take that subfloor glue back after I made a big show of it, I guess.
All right, there's your like 1 hour staircase. Obviously not screwed together, but a few things to remember. I basically just started with, this is a bit more complicated because it's stone and it's uneven, but you really, whenever I'm building stairs, I don't really like to do it in any other way other than starting with where we're coming from and where we're going to, or vice versa. I need the elevation difference in terms of one single number between one level and the next. So it's about 42 inches there or so. So I came over to my graph paper and I used one block, one line is 2 inches here, and I just put, you know, a 40 inch tall, or 42 inch tall, actually started at 40, added the 2 inches to the ground. And you don't want your top stair to be flush with your surface. You want your outside, in almost every case. It's really unprofessional in my opinion when you get that top stair. It's like a protrusion from the upper level anyway. So we want each drop down to be the same height as well as the top of this to the ground. So I start with this outside line, right? I start with figuring out that I'd like an even number, so I went by, if I used 42 to start with, so obviously 7 goes into 42 an even number of times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, 6 pieces of 7. And so I just came down 7 and over 10 here, which is even more than the 2 by 10. The run can vary infinitely. However far out you run, you can still come down 7. You'll always come down the same number of steps. The most important thing is the divisor of the overall height. I like to use something easy to translate to the fractional carpentry scale. So a whole number, 0.25, 0.5, whatever. When you get into like 1/8 of an inch or anything less than that, as part of one of the divisors, the line weight and stuff can screw you, and the kerf of the saw can start screwing you, so it gets to be too much detail. So I stick to, at the very least, 1/4 of an inch, but in this case I went with 7 because it divides into 42 easy, and I started with 40, but I actually went to 42 because I know I can push into the stone some, and I know 42 divides once again by an easy number like 7. If I wanted to actually put riser pieces of lumber in the riser positions themselves, I had to go on to 7.25 because that's the height of a 2x8, and so an unripped 2x8 cross cut to the right length will sit right into a 7 1/4 rise, but that's not the plan here. So minimum lumber, that's more of a beauty thing than we don't need. So I decided that I'd go for about 10 inches out just for the purposes of this drawing, and up 7, but then you have to start pushing down 1 1/4 inches to accommodate the fact that you're trying to work out how to lay out the stringer, which is the side piece, but we have to remember that we're achieving a stair experience or a surface that includes the plate, the tread itself that goes across each. So once I've got the line doing 710, 710, 710, 710, I push down from each surface 1.5 inches, and I represent that, and that takes 1.5 inches out of this last, if this was 7 inches just like this was 7 inches, now when I come over here and I add 1.5 inches, I push it down shorter, and then I add 1.5 inches again, and I push it up again to that total 7 inches. But here I add the 1.5 inch stair height, but I don't have a piece of lumber on the ground, and so worst case, or long story short, the stringer has to actually be cut up shorter, and you can see that there, and so it's by 1/2 of an inch. And obviously at the top, we've got what we need to have here. Of course, the subfloor is there, but once again, we're working to start with this original line, which ends up being the outside surface geometry of the stair, and I just start adding details below that and pushing down to what will actually turn into what to cut on the stringer. And as far as the stringer, I set my little stair guides to 8.5 instead of 10, because a 2x10 is 9 1/4 wide, and I wanted to have a bull nose, which gives it some professionalism, which without too much extra work, I wanted this to overhang. So I ended up, rather than 9 1/4 or even 10, which would have been out here, I ended up going to 8.5 for my run, which just takes the overall staircase in and tucks it in more, and it provides this overhang, which makes it once again a bit more professional looking. And so I set my stair guide to 8.5 here, and I set it to 7 for my rise there, and every time I push into the side of the lumber smooth and I stop, which is hard to do with just one hand, but unless you have a waney or a broken edge, for the most part it puts you right at 7, right on the intersection with the outside edge of the lumber, and I'm right on 8.5 here. And if I go like you saw me do, line to line to line. Whatever I end up making is really close, good enough. You wouldn't do it this way for a fine set of hardwood finish quality stairs, but if you're real careful, you could build stairs this way and glue them all up together without any overhangs, and then clad them with hardwood or hardwood veneer plywood, and that's good enough for a finished staircase. So I like to do a nice job doing it this way. Anyway, the one I traced, you saw me do that, and then I cut it to match. So regardless of its little idiosyncrasies, I copy them on both sides so I don't have to start compounding any kind of error to the best of my ability. And finally, I cut the stringers out. I took less out before I came over and looked right at it. I put a flat bottom and I put a flat back, and I came over with the illustrations of the steps, and I see that overall, and I can even carefully measure, I see that overall it's doing kind of what I wanted to do before I go cutting it all. I mean, I might change the step geometry or something like that within, I just haven't overly committed. And so when I like it, then I can come back and I can cut all the notches out for the stairs with the circular saw, finish the inside corner with jigsaw. Some guys overcut enough with the circular saw for the piece to fall out. It's probably not the end of the world. Probably better if you're using 2x12 for a stringer, because then your distance from your inside corner to the outside of that lumber is another inch or more. More meat. So I didn't overcut it. I chose to finish with the jigsaw, sawzall, handsaw, whatever, for that reason. That way, because, you know, this is going to be what they get for stairs. And if you want me to circle back and you want me to do a better job or change or do anything more permanent or anything with these stairs, it's going to be, you know, additional cost or whatever. We did this much, so this will get you in and out of the house. Second round of landscaping and finished stuff out here is going to be a second round. And I just say that because some further choices here based on that, right? So we saw that this settled, and then we saw that I backfilled it, and it may settle again. Regardless, I'm going to assemble this thing well, and then I'm going to hang it so that the surface here is the full perfect 7 inches from that surface down that it is all the way down the stairs. And then I'm going to kind of excavate underneath of it, or vice versa, excavate. I'm going to put that last piece of 2x10 that's got a big corner missing. I'm going to put him on the ground and kind of use him as a surface to take the weight of and the load and pressures and everything of coming and going on these stairs for probably a year or more, because hopping up and down them is going to drive the edges of the stringer down in to the ground to where it's harping on or otherwise stressing out the attachment up here. And so I'd rather a big surface practically the size of a tread going underneath them there. Therefore, you'll end up with that in there. And so we have 6 stairs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. However, that doesn't require a piece of 2x10. So I had figured there were about 5 or 6 steps when I ordered up the lumber. And of course you get at least 2 out of each 8-foot stick. And I had planned on making the treads 4 feet in width, because it essentially just maximizes the lumber that we ordered. I've got to make stringers. What I need for a stringer is more than 1/2 of an 8-footer, and I wasn't comfortable. I might have ordered a 12-footer and gotten both stringers out of it, but I ended up getting 8-footers for the stringers. And so what was left over from them is more roundabout like this, and it's not a full tread if you make 48-inch piece treads. So I came over here, and you probably watched me scratching my head and stuff, and it's like, because essentially if I made 48-inch wide treads, I wouldn't have enough to make a third stringer. So if the treads were in here at 4 feet wide practically, you start scooting the stringer out to 2 or 3 inches from the edges like these are, and you start to get a span in the middle here that's really greater than what you want for a stairway that's supposed to work and look professional and be safe, and it's not going to snap right in half. But then I start wanting to make a third stringer, and I didn't have the nut lumber to make a third stringer if I was going to make the treads that wide. So basically that design was going to force me to buy another piece of lumber and leave behind entirely the 2 remnants from the stringers that I made out of 2x8, and you get all done. The way that this is attached here, this isn't going to be permanently attached to this. We'll do it for now, but later when we come back, you're going to have what's called an appearance board. Remember the gray appearance board here, right? So we're going to come through here with, this trim's all going to be gone. We're going to install an exterior door, right? And then I'm going to take the brick molding and I'm going to go right down past the edges of the threshold, and I'm going to go right on down to flush down here, most likely. No, I take that back. I'm going to take the brick molding down and stop it. But the J channel against it, the J channel, that will go all the way down to here, and between that J channel and the corner, we're going to fill in with clapboard, which is the look that you want here.
we're going to crowd the look of a full-size door up toward the roof and stuff like that. So the least that we can do is drag the lines of the clapboard down both sides. And so what do you do in the middle? You put a big PVC white appearance board that's solid plastic after you flash this whole subfloor, and the threshold's aluminum, and this appearance board solid plastic, and nothing's getting wet here. And so that piece of plastic appearance board, it sits end to end from J channel end over to J channel end, and then you reattach your stairs. Well, I don't want to come over here and be, because the tread's going to touch that appearance board again, the stringer's going to touch that appearance board, and if it's any wider than this J channel line, we're going to start smooshing and needing to cut into the J channel to fit it, and have to cut in and around and fit it over to the clapboard, and we start getting into Janktron 9000 kind of bullshit, like this type of situation up here, which we don't want to have happen. And so we've thought about that ahead. See, unlike this individual here who didn't think ahead until it was too late, or not necessarily right there, but these situations like this. So it's going to make better sense for me to be as wide as the door opening. You don't want to accidentally come brushing out the door opening with a foot and miss a step and have nothing there. That's kind of least, at the bare minimum, you need to be out there. And so once we've got a door jamb and stuff in here, and the door slab itself will be within an inch or two, you know, within the boundary of the edges of the stair treads, will be the door traffic zone. So that's a safety thing. So that's good. And then we're not any longer than J channel to J channel. What does this all mean, Chaz? What does this all mean? That means that we can go with a 36-inch length board, which in the case of this one stringer remnant was just missing that tiny little corner based on the way that I cut it. So he could be used for a tread. And then we had an odd number of treads, so we didn't need even the other one. And so we end up not needing 2 treads out of the lumber that I planned for the project. We end up with a full 2x10 by 8 that can go back. And I think he's probably worth at least $20-something, if not closer to, he's between $18 and $28 probably somewhere or more. So that's nice. And then the other remnant that is too small, there's too much missing. I did look at making a tread out of him as well, but he's got too much of a corner going, I think. Kind of. Anyway, he becomes what we're going to use on the ground underneath everybody here. Happy, happy, joy, joy. Hopefully that was sensical and not asinine and ridiculous. This is a 2x8 remnant left over from the plate that we built right on top of the concrete. And then we get a couple blocks here. These were the ends, you know. So these were getting pretty darn cupped and checking out pretty badly. So I was happy to cast him off in that case. And this guy came out of the middle, and he doesn't really have many blemishes or anything. He's almost kind of corner sawn-ish. He's still kind of heartwood, but whatever. He's not a bad little block to do something else with. So this is all the thinking that goes into getting that stairs knocked out, maximizing the lumber order. You know, speculative, didn't get a ton of lumber, skipped the riser faces and stuff, all of that stuff just for the sake of cost. Thought I might have had enough for 3 stringers if I wanted wider stairs. But again, turned out that was where the line was drawn. And I ended up liking these narrower stairs anyway. They're more balanced. When you start going wider, it's more magnificent and more dramatic. And when you start doing that with the form, then the way that it's constructed, being all cheap and janky, it starts looking just weird, drawing more unnecessary attention. I suppose now that I'm thinking about it, I could have built these so that a 2x8 could go in as a riser face. If in fact starts looking more and more like these are going to be the permanent stairs for a while, I could have done that much, and I could have gone down to more like 8 inches in terms of run, so that I had the room to be on this and fit up without a custom rip, and for 1.5 inches to disappear, and then some. Actually, if this is 8.5, I go to 8. You probably go to 7 3/4 or something for a run, so that you still have about 1/2 inch. 1/4 inch is a little tight, more closer to a 1/2 or whatever for overhang after a riser cover. But you know, we'll have to peel stuff like that, or I might actually turn that around. So that makes a good example. And this part of when you're setting everything all together here to look at it, not only to get some visual satisfaction, but I can start seeing like making trades, you know. I liked that nipped corner being over here because it kind of makes it a little bit more, it hides the idea that it was an issue or an error if it's the way in which you approach the stairs. Maybe it's just to sort of, you know, keep you from bashing your foot on an outside corner that's awfully sharp. But if I turn it around, I've got to flip it over. And another thing that I'll mention is that it's cupped this way. And that's kind of how I want to see things. I don't like them up there. It's got staples, it'll rip your ankle open. Some tags and stuff to take off. But I like to see stuff cupped like that. I know it can be kind of slippy on the lee side. It can grow mold, mildew, and there's that going on. But the other way just stands and holds water and becomes a puddle. And then sediment from shoes that slap through there and it rinses off, and it creates enough of an organic little area, believe it or not, outside of where you're always walking, in the puddle that forms and splashes the sediment out and away from where you're always stepping. That can become infused into the wood and be enough to grow more algae, and then that's actually growing on it constantly in a puddle of water, and it's even more prolific and it ends up being more slippery. So being curved up, you know, I just put some thought into everything if I can help it. I could even stick some like some skateboard grip tape, like stair gripper things on there, although these are kind of moist still. Probably give it a week in the sun or something and then apply those. I don't know, I might be able to get away with that. I might sand them. Never sand them quick, and I may get some of those. But right now I gotta go and I gotta get the hardware to hang them safely on the rim joist after I assemble them. And if I'm doing that, maybe I will look at the cost of those treads. I think they're like $10 each. So it's like $50 worth of that. But if they start becoming a problem and you want to put something like that on, at that point it's too late because you can't get anything to stick. So I might just bite the bullet here on their behalf and do something so that they're kind of nice, and we'll, you know, they could be considered the permanent stairs, I think, for right now. And we'll get this piece of lumber taken back. The rest, we'll likely put this to work somewhere around here. The corners and elbow or triangles will go in the garbage can. Sorry guys, it's so hot. All right. Okay, well, playing games with the battery babysitter again. I guess I didn't get any of that, but obviously just screwing the threads down. I just made sure that my overhang, I just got my center line of my overall front of the place. I got a center line of the overall width of the step. I figured out where I wanted the stringers to be. It's about 2 3/4 of an inch in, so I checked that that was what I had here, and I set my square to 3.5, which puts me 2 3/4 plus 3/4 of an inch, which is to the middle of an 1.5 inch thick piece of lumber, and that's 3.5. So I use my speed square to drag a couple lines here, and I'm 1.5 to 2 inches from both sides on that line all the way down, so I can put it on all of the treads because it's on the once it's on the tread, it's on the tread. And once I did the top overhang both sides, I came down to the bottom and just made sure the overhang was right on both sides. And that kind of pulls the stringer into a point where you could check one end of all 3 of these and commit to them. And then you come over here, and unless the stringer's super curved out or curved in, everybody's pretty much on. And in the event that it is a bit curved, you just check your medium, your middle, you know, of everybody. And you push him in or pull him out to make him right, which I didn't need to do. And in that case, then you've locked him in there and here, and the 2 that are left in between the places that you can make commitments there are almost, you know, they should be dead nuts. I don't even measure. And so that's how you end up being quick about putting it together square and in all the ways that matter. And we got to go get some hardware to truly hang it safe. But I towed through this end of it into the edge of our new green plate on both sides. And so I ought to be able to, not only that, but it's leaning up against and jammed like a ladder on the ground. So between the 2 things, feels good, man. Feels real good. Looks a bit twisted here for some reason. It must be because it's an optical illusion. This pencil line is tweaking everything out for me visually. I better sand that off before somebody else sees it and thinks I'm a hack. They're all crowned in the right way. I'll dig the little tag off of this end. I don't know if there's one on the other side. Yeah, we can usually use the diagonal plier to just bite it like a parrot beak. I hate when that shit gets left on, so super unprofessional. That's a good project for the kid, whoever your little apprentice is, or our friend Edward on this one. But I won't ask him to do that. It's his big damn project. I can do that much for him, so I'll throw that out. Well, there you go. We can make it a little more official. Oh, and I need longer screws to put that subfloor down. I don't know if you noticed, but I got ready to show you that going on, and then
just shut that time lapse down because I don't know. Are these 1.25 inches? Hang on. I would have thought these look like 1 5/8, but they might be 1.25 inches. Now they're 1.25 inches, I guess. But I would have thought it's just not enough. At 1/2 inch or something, you really want another 1/4 inch or more. So while those will work for plenty of stuff, we really want to get us, because the whole point of screwing it and making our piece with not gluing it is that it's really damn tightly drawn in and there forever. And I had a few, I started at the front, and they weren't pulling the head in flush, you know? I wasn't getting something like that. I was seeing the top little, I wasn't able to pull it in. It's kind of, sometimes that happens with end grain. The end grain won't hold anything tightly enough, but obviously we're not into end grain here. We're into the side of this 2x8, and it still wasn't pulling in. So, want us a longer screw. Not worth burning through 3 inches to do that unless it becomes worth it. I'll just get a small box of 1.5 inches or 2 inches. And the hangers, and come back and make that the case. And then I think we're down to like waiting for that concrete to cure up, waiting for our gravel to get here. I don't know, I really don't want to mess with bees. But if I'm going to start tearing into the front of this at some point, I'm going to want to be ready to, I should be watching from now until then and killing off any bees that I see periodically with at least what I've got here for bee killers. So I want to keep that in the back of my mind. I guess the other thing I could do today after I get back with that stuff is get the backhoe attachment on, and we can fluff up that pile. And whatever I get fluffed up, I can switch back to the bucket and I pour off in this hole, pour off in the hole out back. Because again, we're angling to kind of backfill all around. That makes a difference, you know. Stops looking like the same old site that it's been since almost week 1 or week 2 or whatever there. It's, you know, starting to weigh on everybody that, you know, despite the fact that we put one foot in front of the other every day, it's how we eat the elephant. You know, you just take a bite, just keep taking a bite. Everybody's good, but we need to make a big change here in terms of visual progress. So I think that's going to be the ticket, and that's something that you want to keep in the back of your head too, because everybody likes to see that visual progress. All right, well, I've got such low battery that I can't even roll a time lapse, but if you've never seen somebody put screws in before, I can't help you today. We just missed out. I got to stop. It's the end of the day, and I'm just making dummy errors, like no big deal at all, but I don't know why I thought, I just couldn't find my layout. I ended up thinking here, how did this work? I thought it was here, and then while I was there and it wasn't in that spot, I just went 3/4 inch away, 3/4 inch away, and didn't find anything. So I went downstairs and looked, and I see that I had to go another 3/4 inch inboard to get onto my layout. And so at that time I only had this first chalk line. So then I came up here and I moved my chalk line over 3/4 inch instead of 1.5 inches. And then I tried compounded it over here, and then tried to screw here, and I was off, and then just moved over just to see, and I was back where I needed to be there. And so I didn't put any more lines down. I just moved 3/4 inch off the incorrect line in the correct direction, just so we haven't got lines all over on everything here. I don't really want to even see the head. See the highlight on the, see that highlight on the front edge of the screw? I don't want to see that. That's a proud screw. I don't even know if I can pull that in at this point. No, I can't. Where are we here? No, I can't pull that in. So, you know, that is something you can feel, and that, you know, you can't see in these other cases. That's a flush screw. And obviously over here we've busted right on into there, but I don't want to pull way down in either. You know, I don't want to bury the screw head either. That's unprofessional. So, walking on somebody else's site at this stage, and I start seeing all these tries to find a framing layout and stuff like that. I just chuckle to myself. And so I know when it is that those things happen. You just are coming to the end of your rope. I'm like pouring sweat. And I just wanted this to be functional, and it meets code. We've got our Simpson stringer hangers on there. I suppose I didn't put every single screw in, but I think that that's probably necessary, but certainly isn't that way yet. But we're really, so firstly that gets applied through the back of it into the meat of this lumber sort of area here, and then you set your stringer down in there and fold it and penetrate the stringer on both sides of the miter basically, and you end up well connected for a temporary stair or even a deck stair. So this is floating out here on a foot, like I say, is going to be necessary probably over time to keep it from pushing its way into the earth. It may need a few taps with the sledgehammer just to sit it into the stone down, you know, being where we need to go with it a little, but I'm going to let it get some rain on it and sink the stone overall and see if we don't get there that way first. And so you could say, like, by design, it's a little high out front right now, so we can have natural settling and maybe a little active dialing, rather than trying to pick it up and throw stone underneath it and go up to level, if you follow what I'm saying. I am, like I say, completely shot. Didn't bring the keys but for the skid steer today, but that's fine. We made it to the end of the day without getting to that, but that's next. We're going to start by backfilling tomorrow, and hopefully our gravel shows up too. We'll see. Well, I got that half filled. Maybe it's easier to see from over here. About to there, but again, or not again, but for the first time I'll tell you outright that I'm adding that material from the original site. And when I get over here and it starts cascading out onto the stone that we filled up to a certain extent, I start trying to roll over onto it and spill some more of this wash number 2 to increase the amount of wash number 2s. I want to be at about 2/3 of the backfill. This is a little high. This is, you know, more like it right in here. Somewhere along this lower dot, you know, these about where we are there at the chimney with stone before I get all the way up to it with that material from here. And, you know, to some extent we may use, this is the number 2 filtered bank run gravel, which I mean, it has some oversize in it, in my opinion. So, but you can see they're all kind of, I have to see what he wrote on the slip. If he just called it bank run. We were talking about just bank run, which is even cheaper because it doesn't go through any filter. And you're just sort of hedging a bet that there won't be anything much bigger than this in there. Which is what gravel soil is, you know, you could have a gravel pit there ostensibly. So this is what you get out of the bank when you go in there and scoop it out. It's a cheap material that's just as good as a crushed material, in my opinion, because it has its own fines rather than crushing something to create fines like crushed limestone or crushed gravel. It's got its own fines right in it as a result of being glacially deposited. I gotta get some garbage out of here, such as this can lid, and such as, I think these, oh, I guess those are stones. I thought they were like kids' balls. Your kids' balls are in my hole. So we'll get that in here now. I realize though, one of the nice things about building a loop underground for the downspouts on this house, other than like, here's another case of we're not going to do this, but this would be the time that you would do it and it would make perfect sense. You would get a vertical on the inside corner, on either inside corner of the entryway. And so that one would go down, over, back, come out here again, travel downhill, travel over, catch this one. Or no, I guess that goes, so we haven't got to come up here anywhere. Because I had been thinking I might like to route that and just go underground with it over there. But you know what, at this point, I kind of want to do. It would be so much wiser for that to turn here, come straight down and go underground over and over to what I want to do here. This is the highest part of it. So we're going to come across the back at a downhill angle from me through over there and into that low area. So starting right here underground with SRD 35 or even 20, schedule 20, the white stuff, super cheap. I'm going to trench over through here and trench into there, and that will be where these two downspouts go. And so then this goes down here, and that roof goes to here, which goes over to there. But really, and this is where, yeah, I mean, you could put something here and come. And this has got two downspouts, one to share over to there and one to here. Anyway, we need something here, and that would be the last one. So everything's local to this one end, except this other side of this gable comes over to there. And no matter where you go, I mean, I think the thing to do is to actually come through at that angle up here and over to here and turn and come down. So the last vertical will be here, which will completely avoid having to do something that either crosses from where it bends here. Like you could bend it as soon as you bend it here. It's really ugly to do this, just for the sake of missing that window, and then to hang it at a shallow angle over the foundation like that. No. I would go up here, where to here, and then hide it and go right over to there and jump into it there all in white. So we need a drop here that's highest, downhill, 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 to tee in, to go downhill over to there. And then at the front, I think, so what I was getting at was that this has been filled now for the sake of being able to drive in here, and I'll need that to drive in and dump the fill. Today, I have to move that stuff out of there too, those straps. But we're going to need to re-excavate here, which is no problem. I could do it with the backhoe, just to catch one more vertical and go over to here, which is just super, super worth doing. That way, you know, leaving them straight, rough ends. When you backfill, you want to trim it high enough so that you can backfill without bumping into it. And then you want to put an elbow on and kick it away and put a little piece of downspout on the ground, for example, in, I guess not in this location if it's always been like that, but wherever you may be. And then it's just pouring water on the ground there. It has to be mowed around, get kicked and blown away, and you're right back to pouring water right on your foundation again. Where if you were to put verticals on the foundation and tie them in just a little bit underground to keep it all clean and neat outside, they can be worked to while grading, and the grade can come and go up and down the length of them, all within that vertical piece of pipe before you adapt over to the vertical downspout piece. And so it's just the way that you want this, and it was one of the fundamental places where all the problems at this house began, was that the gutters and downspouts and drains away from the footprint of the building weren't intact and functional. If they get backed up enough with leaves that are left untrimmed to rot down and create soil to grow things in, those things have root systems every year, and for several years after that plant is dead and the newer generations are alive, those root systems are intact well enough, plus the new root systems of the year in question, to create one solid root ball mass that will never come out of there and will only grow larger and larger and eventually start drooping down. You can see them sometimes like from the downspout itself, if it gets separated, like a big, you know, raccoon's tail, or even longer when that finally breaks or whatever like that. It's just full of that type of stuff, and so it compounds forevermore. And so to get set back to zero here, we're going to have to eventually have those, get them cleaned out of there, and make sure that the downspouts go all the way down to the ground. And so I'd be remiss if I wasn't ready to catch them and go right around and over into the backyard with everything. This house really does a nice job of consolidating. In fact, I go so far as to say that the gutters and downspouts were installed professionally, and they're actually, as beat up and frigged up and dysfunctional as they are, that's a product of just woeful neglect. An unbelievable amount of absolutely zero neglect. I like to think that I'm experienced enough to look at something and say that was put together correctly and just never got the routine maintenance that it should have gotten, versus something that initially went together like a pile of shit. That's, again, I pride myself on that distinction, and that's what I would say occurred here. So anyway, we're doing some backfilling today, but I got to remember that we got to get into some other areas here. However, essentially all the way around the house, you know, 3/4 of the way around the house from about here all the way around here, no worries about total backfill. And this is where it gets kind of complicated, and the only kind of questionable areas, you know, whether or not we redig this here. But I just wanted to mention that. Meanwhile, I'm going to get back to serving some bank run gravel into the garage. All right, my second 20-ton load of bank run has arrived. Yeah. Zoop. It's around 250, 275. For this much delivered. Ooh, he's got electric latches and stuff. It's a low-key nice truck. Steel wheels on the back instead of polished aluminum. You know, smooth surface rather than any kind of other kind of body lines in it that would help it be more flat. Which is why you see steel folded a lot of times to make it look sharp, because like that warp in the highlight is because it's a nice smooth piece, but it still, you know, wiggles around some. But it's got some features. I don't know if he's got a vibrator in the box. A lot of the nicest trucks do when he gets up. He can buzz it, and well, probably 18 times in this series so far I've talked about that, but it's a little less, far less dressy of a truck than the ones that hauled the debris out of this project. But I had asked them, because they are cheaper, but he said he was concerned about, you know, see, every time that you slough out gravel and you just take a tiny bit of steel with it every time, and the bottom of his bed is getting thin. Didn't want big chunks and stuff falling and hitting it. All right, I gotta pay the piper here, then we can go back to work. All right, I may have to cut back some of that time lapse. I was thinking I'd be doing stuff on camera, and then I got sidetracked. But we ran water on this until I started seeing that we were making sort of a sludge, and so I want to see it percolate down. We just have a little bit of pooling there, whereas over here we've got dryness, you know, in this area here and stuff. And we're just looking for this to help it to pack up tightly. It's worth contributing the moisture. I don't want to see anything like if you watch that movie The Dig on Netflix, where they pre-World War I want to say just before World War I in England, the woman's got some burial mounds on her property, and she hires the local guy to dig and excavate and discover what's in there. And they find they find like a Viking or similar longboat upside down, and so it's got the strength over time and being away from the air to hold the dirt mound up over it. But they just excavated, laid it there, and then continued to pile dirt. And so you see that it was good in the film. I appreciated this, that underneath it, it had settled down over time, and there was actually a cavity. And the woman excavating, I think, puts her arm down through the boat's hull and into that cavity. And that's because, even though the boat probably set into fluffy, kind of tightly packed dirt at the time, over time, things migrate downward. And you don't want to put a floor in here with a expansion joint and stuff all the way around and sit the edge of it on top of this threshold and on top of that threshold over there. And then have the base go down even a quarter of an inch or anything, because then essentially it'll sit down and then break off somewhere. You'll have a big crack coming up through here because your core area has settled and your threshold has obviously not traveled down whatsoever, and so we want to avoid that. And so you don't want to be in a hurry to pack up a space like that and feel funny about contributing all that water, because you want to do everything that you can to pack it up tight. This out here appears to be nice and flat, but I think when we get a bunch of rain out here, if anything, you'll see it ramp up immediately at the house where it's dry on account of the overhang, and then it'll probably soak over there, so maybe not, but we'll have what we had at the front of the house here earlier in the week, sort of a bowl kind of depression. And it may be significantly different in this area versus, you know, the trenching. This will be high, and that'll be probably sunk. You'll essentially see a witness mark over, you know, where we've added. And so that's why I think it's a safe bet for me to get a couple more loads of bank run. I can't be doing anything with this ramp until we've done everything in and out of the window here, and we've got the window installed and the well itself that holds back the material from being filled against it. So there's no backfilling against the back of the house for some time now, because that egress window is our only sort of working hole. But I will be pouring off some more of that in here tomorrow, and then following it up with stone, again, to the point where we're kind of 2/3 full of the washed stone that we've got out front. And then I think this is a bit high in here, so actually what I might do, rather than putting material in there, is kind of get in here with the backhoe and kind of slough it and try to get it over there. Although, you know what, I changed my mind, because we're at the same level out here as the waterproof membrane, so we're going to be there at least to here, and then start tapering it away, so there's no harm in driving right up on this and just backfilling on top. And then I probably set up the backhoe and trench through here and over to there, as discussed, for the downspout, and start looking at getting that. I'll probably run that right along on top of the footer, although you just need a little fall, so you're going uphill from here because you want everything to come this way, but going uphill a little and then turning up a little more and a little bit more and a little bit more over to there, and then coming straight up. I just want to keep everything underneath the ground by 6 inches or more, so that it's held, you know, quite well, and there's no risk of it ever appearing, you know, or being, if you wanting to grade lower and it being in the way. So we'll start low here and, you know, increase our chances. On the other hand, I don't necessarily want to take rainwater as close to the bottom of the footing as possible. The underground quality of this route that we're talking about is to keep it easy to mow and live around and clean looking, and be sure that it's solidly plumbing the moisture away. But going unnecessarily deep with it's just bringing it down further away from service if you need to do it. So we just want to strike a balance there. But feeling pretty good about this whole situation. We did establish, I think, that
that wall just needs to be pulled over on the foundation in that location. There wasn't any problem with the concrete right there. If you remember that episodes and episodes ago, there is actually a problem with the concrete from just earlier in this episode as discussed, but I was thinking there was something like that happening in the back, which it is not. I'm not going to pack this up because I think I am going to trouble myself to put the downspout down here, and so that's got to dip to just below the window, at least a good amount, and then go over on a downhill, and then go over on a downhill, and then tie into that line that goes out into the backyard. Sorry if I said that just earlier in this episode. It's just lots of stuff flying around in your head. Want to make sure and say it all. We got that used up out the front, so I guess I'll move the machine so it can be delivered without me being here. The first load, the second load I'll have to write a check for it, so I can't leave the machine in the way. We got the garbage at the street to get rid of that. We got that coil of corrugated perforated tile that was unopened, taken back for a refund. And Ed's telling me, now you tell me what you think. He said he's getting started cleaning up in here, making some room for me to put my workshop, because I think they want me to get the garage floor and the basement floor poured all at the same time, which means Chazzy ain't got nowhere to put his tools unless Chazzy can put his tools in the house here. But we can't put the pallet of mortar in here, and we can't use the mortar until after we've got those floors poured, because we want to come through the window holes probably. And the mortar would be used by the mason while he's doing the windows and the blocking. But I also realized that the holes in here that I want to block closed, the floor, their bottom is at the same height as the threshold for this door. And so the floor would have to be retained or held back from going in there. I think it overcomplicates things to pour the floor over into that opening. So you'd want to, where are we? You'd want to hold the floor back from it with something, because later the mason's going to come back and block that shut. And he won't be here first because we got to have the holes to get the floor poured in the basement. I'm just thinking they could probably do it without anything, but they're going to be really irritated. It may cost us more to get the pump truck to go all the way up and over the house and in the back window, because coming through the glass block windows is not going to happen. And so I just want those window openings here for when the concrete flat work is being done. And so we've got a little bit of, collateral, kind of cost in accommodating that order. In small ways, because in the big ways it makes a big difference. I'm going to leave the breeze to blow through here tonight. I will probably roll this down because I don't need Pratt County's plate compactor getting stolen. But with the sun and the window being open and it being able to go downward, I think we'll see what we want in the morning. And if we don't, then I'll see you in court. We can go down and look at the pier. That's sort of cured off. I got to get the leaf blower. That's why I came up to blow the filth off of that. This is just great here. That's the actual cable drop. Over here is the old antenna for television and the motor control to turn the antenna for the television, which is going to come off. And we're going to end up getting a high lift and going up and cleaning those gutters out, because it's just going to be one big, anaconda of roots. And they're all woven, and it's never coming out of there unless you go up there and physically haul it up and out of there. So, at some point, we'll do all the high level, and we may even sneak a few branches off of some trees. Well, we've got that thing if we've got the time. This got bumped when I took that strap down. But here's this thing here looking solid as a rock. Liquid rock. Getting all the dirt all over it. I'm pretty content with that. There we go. It is relatively flat. So I don't want to load it until next week, but even tomorrow if I get in here. Oh, where did Ed put the cribbing blocks? They're not up to, threw them in the window hole. Okay. So we'll probably start here and try to lift that and help by using this, or vice versa, I guess. But if we were able to get to where we were trying to go there, I think that's going to be real easy, because if anything, it'll have just the tiniest belly here. And again, over here, I'll wait until I can move that over with confidence. So, I guess that's the end of today. Well, this isn't as dry as I would have thought the next day would make it. It's definitely drier, and will ultimately be very dry eventually. And it'll be pretty hard too, which will be just right. And we'll dial in the exactness of it at that point. At this point, we got it pretty darn good. And I just got another 20-ton load of bank run, so let's get that spread out. Or no, that's getting pushed up on this girl right at the back in the crevasse. we'll finish that out there. We got this much. I don't know if I guess my phone died yesterday, so Ed got this plate compacted yesterday after I got it all backfilled around with the bank run. And so I guess I'll set this up back here after I get the tripod, and then we'll get about to, again, we can't obscure the egress window. And I guess at that point, since the bucket's on it, I'll do that much. Then I'll take the bucket off, put the backhoe on, loosen up the pile as much as I can. Then I'll put the bucket back on. And then we can throw some of that site dirt into here. And if we can get that far, we can go back to some of that washed stone and then some more of that bank run until we've kind of used it up and it peters out somewhere over on this point. And we also want to pull this down when we backfill this area, but I think I said already that we can drive up and dump over here to fill there, because that's all existing elevation and it'll need to be there down the road. And this is actually what we want to scoop out, and so it'll be more over there that we work from when we backfill where I'm standing right now. All right, let's get to work. Okie silly dokio. I may have had some extra long segments by accident, but I might trim them out. I might not. You'll live. We got this area that's low, kind of filled with existing soil. This area here, and start peeling this off. We're going to have to be there, like I say, up in this area, but out here we've built it up quite too much, and I can't get right in with that bucket. It's just too much surface area on the leading edge, and I haven't got enough weight. A machine like Sean's, if you remember from early in the series with the tracks on it, I mean, significantly, probably double horsepower or more, and probably at least 3 times the weight, or if not closer to 4 times the weight of my machine. Plus, being on tracks is so much nicer. This is just, you don't see it in the time lapse, but I'm shaking to not stirred by the time I'm done. My neck kind of hurts from getting slammed all around the site. These are the things that keep it from being a handy material to grade with when you're working with the existing soil, depending on the location. But a lot of times around where I work, you got these big head busters in there and stuff, and they're just, if you got a second person and you have to do it, then they can weed those couple dozen things out as you go, but I haven't really got that. And so we're just going to do our filling, and everything that we do with this is lower than we want to be when we're all done. We'll peel that off, we'll put it in here. You notice I put the stone in that was washed, and then some bank run on top, all the bank run and stone I want next to the building. I avoided coming all the way over. It was I had initially thought that we'd get this far and just have a walkway here, and actually I was going to try and bust it down so you don't have to keep coming way over here, and you could just run down there. But I don't want to bury the end of this thing to the point where I'm really having a hard time getting it out of there, and so it's no harm leaving it for now. And I got to come back with the backhoe and loosen that up. The machine's getting kind of hot, so we're going to give her a break for the weekend. But eventually we'll get all this in here coming up next week, most likely. I have to get some piping for the drops, for the downspout to go over. And I got the trench here, as you probably saw me dig it out, so it can come through with the last piece and go out into there. And I think I'm allowed to put the sump pump into that, and that keeps it clean when it kicks on. That can flow out over into that low area as well. We got the stone thrown through the window to cover the area where the mortar bags and stuff were. It ended up a little high, and we got to take a little over there. Oh, the pier got all white and cured up. I guess Ed took the power already for upstairs, so he's going to do some cleaning up stairs this weekend now that he and his wife can get in and come and go up, with the stairway to the house, so that's good. This is curing up. We get that little bit of stone. We might have too much in here now. We're going to have to be careful of that. I was relying on some idea of what, I don't know, we may end up needing it over there, I guess. So anyway, and if not, we'll have to pitch it out. Life's a pitch. And I wanted to put bank run right there because we ended up having a broken mortar bag there, which is didn't do nothing but make a gross slime mud. But again, I want the machine to cool off. Cool your jets. But we got this all nice and back filled up. And we might come up quite a bit more with window wells to hold the grade back. But right now, you can install the windows at some point. You can walk all around real handy. This is the only area that kind of has to stay open long after I'm done with everything else. But moved everything into the garage. This is drying out. By next week, it'll be, everything will look like this does in the corner here, which will be good. Got the furnace and hot water tank moved inside. The mortar came in on the pallet in the corner there. So, I guess you could say things are getting pretty serious. I got to pull this over. Remember, we have that little discrepancy. Oh, wow, those are nasty. I must have put all that in. Oh, wow, this is where the old threshold was. Yeah, so we've come up over a foot here. This was something I did a few years ago to try and hold everything together there. So, see how well that did. And now I got to build this all over to catch the door at some point. But that's going to be some of the last and lowly stuff here. Getting the doors and stuff connected and run down. Actually, it has to be after the floor. And we're not 100% that we're going to put the floor in right away in the garage. Because if we needed some financial elbow room, you could use this as the floor for years. And then the same little bit of work to get ready to pour would be necessary. Obviously, you got to move stuff out of it, but here we are. We've already got stuff in it in a matter of moments. If you put the stuff in on pallets, it comes out quick on pallets. I got to get the hand tools stowed. I'll probably poke those through the window hole again. Poke me through the window hole again. I don't know what else to say. Got a little bit of bank run left. It's something I kind of want to just leave around for the first couple days next week and just see. I got to maybe get the truck and get a dump trailer and get all those pallets cleared off. All that wood and that brass and copper and stuff could be taken back to root balls. All that stuff. I want to get the pallets back from underneath of it. I don't see myself using any of that lumber that was left over. It's all full of nails. It came in handy when we needed stuff that was the same dimensional size for that entryway, but that's sort of the last handshake construction, which is to say new to old, that we're going to do here. God, I hope I don't regret that. It really seems like it is. I can't believe there's going to be anything that I missed that stuff. And there's just nowhere to go with it, and it's tying up space and making a mess. So, get that out of here. Oh, and then I'll have a trailer I can get my skid steer home. So, I want to get all my stuff done here for the foreseeable future before I go missing the skid steer. I don't know how far back this pile goes. It can't be much more. I think we're going to immediately start heading practically through the hole. No. Oh, it's another 4 feet. Another 4 to 6 feet of maximum depth based on footprint, and then we start to taper up. So there's a good amount of dirt there. There's another, I don't know, 30, 20 yards there anyway. So that's that. Kind of a week full of random little things that need to get done, but it makes a nice visual progress to everything. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you.